At that time, I proposed my own budget to balance the budget, including giving the teachers a 2% pay raise without raising taxes. So it's time to make a choice. We've been working around the state, been to all 55 counties, working hard. It's a grassroots effort. I don't have the money of my two major opponents, and I didn't start my timer. So just tell me if I'm about ready out of time, but I'm ready to answer your questions, and I'm happy everybody joined in.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Michael Folk, for introducing yourself. Next up will be Mr. Woody Thrasher, candidate for governor here in West Virginia. Mr. Thrasher, give me just one moment to unmute your mic. And you have the floor.
Thanks, Ethan. It was a little over a year ago that I met with the Mon County Republican Committee. I decided to run for governor last year, and I made that decision based on two very simple reasons. I love West Virginia and I love its people, and I'm absolutely confident it is going in the wrong direction under the current leadership of Jim Justice. I believe it's terribly important that you have somebody that represents the Republican Party. He was elected as a Democrat. As Mike referenced, he proposed the largest tax increase in the history of the state. He's refused to support right to work, which is something that I've championed for 20 years. He certainly is not for school choice. You watch how that whole fiasco developed the legislature, and a variety of other issues that shows he not only does not follow the Republican platform, but he is an incompetent, incapable leader who really does not take on the job full time. As I said, I love the state. I've got a track record of being able to create significant economic activity and create a lot of jobs. I've got the Thrasher Group. We employ nearly 500 people, and they're all West Virginia kids that grew up and had the opportunity to have careers and stay here. When I was Secretary of Commerce, I brought in a variety of businesses into West Virginia, and I believe I know how to do that. So I think when you look at the future of West Virginia, it's important to have a leader that's got an effective track record. I do.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Thrasher, for that introduction. Next up will be Mr. Doug Six. Doug, give me one moment to unmute your mic. Okay, Doug, you have the floor.
Good evening, and thank you very much for hosting this. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with not only the fellow candidates, but also to the individuals that may be watching or will watch this in the future. I'm a West Virginia resident. I live in the western end of Montague County. I've been in business for approximately 35 to 37 years total. I've owned businesses, more than one. People ask me about that. I have a degree in ag business management. I live in a very, very rural part of West Virginia. My wife and I were able to build a business out here in the western end of Mon County that employed approximately 130 individuals, which is very difficult to do under the circumstances and where we work, but we were very successful at it. I believe that my experience, and I believe that my goals for our state to become a leader and utilize our natural resources and bring the money back into our state and keep it here for our citizens is very important. And I would appreciate your support, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Six. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Next up will be Mr. Brooke Lunsford. Mr. Lunsford, give me just one moment to get your mic unmuted. Okay, Mr. Lunsford, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you all for allowing me to be here with you this evening. I see a lot of leaders from around the state, a lot of people that have contributed to the turnaround here or the try for the turnaround by getting some Republicans into office. As Doug said, I'm also a lifelong West Virginia guy. I was educated at West Virginia Tech in Montgomery, which is now called WVU Tech. So I've got a little bit of grafted inness there. with you guys here in Morgantown. I want to thank all of you guys that signed up, paid your fees to get out here and do this. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I appreciate each and every one of you for doing it. The reason I'm doing it is I have a Jesus First campaign going, because I put Jesus first on my sign, not to force other people into loving Jesus, but just to keep me straight out there so I don't get too negative on the campaign trail. So I think that people want to believe that things can be turned around. And I think when the president says pray and the governor calls a special prayer, that there must be something to it. If everybody wants to do it, I think maybe we might wait sometimes till it's too late to pray. So maybe we start praying in the beginning. I'm a GOP platform guy. I am pro-life. I'm pro-guns. I'm pro-God, as I've talked about, and pro-business. I want to again thank you guys for allowing me to come on and be part of this program tonight. I have 30 years experience in insurance, so I can see what's going on with the rural hospitals. I can see what's going on with the Affordable Care Act and how it's just destroyed our healthcare insurance system. For 20 years ago, I traveled around the country into 10 different states and did fiber optic cable when it was coming into being. And still today, I've talked to a lot of experts in the field, the people that built most of the systems in the state of Ohio. And I said, hey, we want to do broadband, but how do we do it and do it wisely? Because we're getting a lot of crazy feedback on the 5G. So I think we need to really investigate that. I've got 4 plans, and each of the 4 plans go into each of the 55 counties. Thank you for letting me be here.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Lunsford. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Before we transition into our candidates for Board of Public Works offices, I'd like to again welcome our viewers who are watching on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and on Periscope. Again, my name is Ethan Moore. I'm the chairman of the Monongalia County Republican Executive Committee, and you are watching a virtual town hall for candidates, Republican candidates running for governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, State Treasurer, State Auditor, and Commissioner of Agriculture. And so now we'll let our candidates who are running for seats on the Board of Public Works start. And we'll begin with our incumbent Republican, Patrick Morrissey. Patrick, one moment. Okay, you have the floor. I'm sorry about that, Patrick. We're not hearing your microphone. I have you unmuted, but we're just not getting any audio from you. I'll give you a couple of moments to work out that glitch, and we'll transition to Mac Warner and come right back to you, Patrick. Go ahead, Mac.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks to Ethan, Paula, and Kyle for organizing this. Folks, I'm Mac Warner, Secretary of State, and just wanted to open by telling you I love the job. It's just a fantastic job. We've had some great successes. We may be able to talk about those in a little bit, but I'll owe those successes, we all owe those successes to the team that we've put into place at the Secretary of State's office. It's just the A-team, and they've just been doing a fantastic job. All I have to do is kind of point the ship in the right direction and then turn those people loose. And from Chuck Flannery, Deke Kersey, Mike Queen, Dave Tackett, the whole team is just excellent. Brittany Westfall in the Elections Direction Center. We've also been working collectively with the clerks, and so it's been fantastic. One of the things I love about the job is getting out around the states and working with the 55 county clerks. And while I'm back in Charleston, we have a field team that's out there, and they've been doing an excellent job. And what we're doing in the elections process shows just how much that field team is essential to moving this state along, especially in a time such as this COVID-19 virus. We've truly transformed the office. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit, but it's time for us to continue moving forward with all the great things we've been doing, and not a time to go back to the past. That's my opponent was my predecessor, and that's why there's been such a transformation needed in the office, and that's what I look forward to doing when I get reelected. So again, thanks for giving us this opportunity to join you this evening.
Very good. Thank you, Secretary Warner. We appreciate you joining us. Let me get you muted, and then let's come back to Patrick Morrissey, see if he's got his microphone worked out. Patrick, can we hear you now? No, sir. I'm sorry. We still can't. We're still not getting audio from you. I'm sorry. Nope. No, there we were.
Does that work? Can you hear me?
Yep. We can hear you now. Go ahead. You have the floor.
I apologize. We're ready to go?
Yes, sure.
Yes, sir. You're on the air. Go ahead.
All right. As many of you know, my name is Patrick Morrissey. I'm very proud to serve as your Attorney General. When people talk about folks running for office and trying to effectuate the change we need to really grow and be a dynamic state, many may not realize that I was the first to come across the line in 2012. And in that time, as I'm finishing up my second term as Attorney General, we've taken on so many important fights. Of all the people here tonight, we have so many great folks. I've worked very hard to stand up for the rule of law and your West Virginia conservative values. On a personal level, I'm from Harpers Ferry. I have a wife, I have a stepdaughter, and I just love the great state of West Virginia. I've been very fortunate to spend a lot of time out on the road in all the 55 counties. And when I do, I'm able to talk about why I'm in public service and serving as your AG. I entered public service because I wanted to take on government overreach. I saw what was happening during the Barack Obama years, and West Virginia desperately needed a leader to step up, to stand for conservative principles, and fight against the overreaching policies of Obama. The assault on our Second Amendment, on pro-life policies, in every area of the law, we've stepped up and we've been very strong. We've made West Virginia proud. We've also effectuated major change related to substance abuse, going after the root causes of the epidemic. And I'm proud to be running for a third term as Attorney General. I want to make sure that President Trump has a strong legal ally in the state, because if one of my opponents is elected, we're going to have someone suing the president all the time. That's not what we need. So I'm looking forward to our 3-minute presentation and fielding questions from you. But I want to say thank you all for joining us today.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Next up will be Riley Moore. Riley, Riley, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you so much. And Ethan, I want to thank you and the rest of the Mon County Republican Executive Committee for hosting this Zoom event and broadcasting it live. Thank you for arranging this. I think it's important for us to be able to continue to communicate with people around the state in this difficult time period as it relates to the coronavirus. Anyway, my name is Riley Moore. I'm the Republican candidate for state treasurer. And I live in Harpers Ferry with my wife and my daughter, Lena. We actually are about to add another daughter here next month. So we're very excited about that. And actually, I was born in Morgantown. I was born in Mon General. So always like to talk to folks from Morgantown. So great to be on the call here this evening. And the big three reasons why I am running for state treasurer, folks, right now, currently, we have somebody who is absolutely asleep at the wheel in the office for state treasurer. We have not heard one word from the state treasurer, who's the chief financial officer of this state, about how this coronavirus has affected our investments and the finances of the state. He is the chief financial officer for West Virginia, and he has been absolutely silent on this. I've called this out in an op-ed that I wrote just last month. Still, not a word. And now we have seen that we have lost what looks like billions of dollars in investments. The state treasurer has still not addressed that. What I would like to do to bring to this office is greater transparency. We're not having any of that currently right now from the incumbent. I want to modernize the office, and I want to bring greater accountability to the office as well. I am the only candidate in this race that supports President Trump. Treasurer John Perdue supported Hillary Clinton in the last campaign. He was a delegate to the convention for Hillary Clinton and campaigned against Donald Trump in the state of West Virginia. We need somebody in that office that reflects our values here in West Virginia and also has a very conservative fiscal eye. I'm a former delegate. You can look my voting record. I mean, stellar conservative voting record, top 10 in the state legislature when I served there, top 10 most conservative voting record in the state legislature. I really look forward to everybody's questions, and thank you again to Ethan and the rest of the Mon County Republican Executive Committee for putting this on. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Riley. We appreciate you joining us. Next up will be our incumbent Commissioner of Agriculture, Kent Lanhart. Kent, your mic is unmuted. You have the floor.
Can everybody hear me okay? I guess we can. So I'm going to assume that everybody can hear me, but thank you again. It's great to be talking to my home county and those of you who have joined this video telecast anyway from outside Mon County. We all love West Virginia, and we're all in this team to get in this together to make West Virginia great again. I like to use that term. I also like to say we're making agriculture great again in West Virginia, and we're seeing a lot of great successes. When you look at companies like Rural King coming into West Virginia, they wouldn't be doing that if they weren't seeing some growth in the agricultural businesses in the state of West Virginia. Actually, on January 1st, we had 5,000 more head of beef cattle in West Virginia than the year before. So we know we're doing something, and that was after a fall sell-off because of the drought. We also are seeing things like record numbers of children signing up for FFA and 4-H in the state. In the last 2 years, we've broken the 1960 record of FFA participation in West Virginia, and that's with fewer in West Virginia. So we're doing some great things. My wife's here with me, Shirley, your First Lady of West Virginia Agriculture.
Hi, everybody.
We usually tease everybody that when we were building our sheep and goat barn, she only knocked me off the ladder once while we were setting the trusses. We started with 205 acres and we grew it to 380 acres we own. And we had 5 additional leases at the height of our farming operation. We know what it takes to grow a farm and agriculture here in West Virginia, and we've done it ourselves, and we're doing it for the rest. Most of you know that I'm a retired Marine officer. I was a state senator for 2 years. I'm the only one running for office that knows, on the Republican side, that knows both the legislative process and the executive process. It's been great being your Commissioner of Agriculture. I'm asking you to send me back down to Charleston for another 4 years so we can continue the great work we're doing. We've had some great successes, and we can talk more about it later. Thank you all so much for hosting, and thank you for listening out there in internet land.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Lenhart. And it was a delight to see the First Lady of Agriculture, who is a dear friend of our county committee. She served with us on this county committee for several sessions, and she's a friend of our committee. So Shirley, it was a pleasure to see you this evening. Next up will be Mr. Roy Ramey, who is also a Republican running in the primary for Commissioner of Agriculture. Mr. Ramey, you are unmuted. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Roy Ramey, and I am a small farmer from Cabell County, West Virginia. And we have been on that farm now for 12 years, using regenerative practices in the style of Joel Salatin. And real quick here, I'd like to introduce my family is with me. We're actually traveling as my mother is terminal, and we went down to see her for a couple of days, and on our way back now. So we're coming on here from the road. But anyway, my background includes farming as a kid. We raised hogs and corn, and then now we raise broilers, pastured broilers, pastured pork, and pastured eggs. And like I said, we practice according to regenerative methods as promoted by Joel Salatin. He is the most famous farmer in the world, and I subscribe to and promote a lot of those same methods. So also, I have a extensive military background. I'm still serving now in the Army Reserves, but I've been in the Army for 31 years as a lieutenant colonel, and currently serving as a quality assurance director. And I've spent an extensive amount of time training and developing education and training programs for the Army. So some of the big things that I want to make sure that we do in the agriculture world is to change the regulations and get back to what the Republicans say of, let's get those government and the regulations out of our business. So I look forward to addressing some of the specific questions and let you take it back over from here. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ramey. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Last but not least, we do have a candidate for governor, Charles Sheedy, who was able to join, and we'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself. Charles, give me one moment. We'll get you unmuted. Okay, Mr. Sheedy, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank everyone for participating in this tonight. And my difficulties getting on here has been a direct vision of our need for broadband in West Virginia. I am a lifelong true Republican. I embrace term limits, lower taxes, smaller governments. I am pro-God, gun, and life. It is time to fix what's broken in West Virginia instead of throwing tax dollars at a problem. I'm not a politician or a businessman, but a retired common sense working man, ready to fix broken agencies, and we have plenty of them in the state. I'm ready to eliminate corruption. I'm not seeking endorsements or outside of the state money. I'm working for the office. I'm not buying title. I'm the only military combat veteran running for governor and a retired state employee. That's all I have right now, other than thank you again, everyone, for this time and allowing us to come into your homes tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sheedy. Again, echoing his sentiments and the words of all of our other panelists, I'd like to welcome our viewers who are watching via Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or Periscope on Twitter. This is a town hall for you. We're conducting a virtual town hall. My name's Ethan Moore. I'm the chairman of the Montague County Republican Executive Committee, and we have with us candidates tonight as our panel who are Republican candidates running for executive branch offices. So that includes candidates who are running for governor, and then Secretary of State, Attorney General, Commissioner of Agriculture, State Auditor, and State Treasurer. So if you have a question you would like to pose to our panelists, please post them right in the comments there on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or give us a tweet via Twitter if you're watching on Periscope. We're going to start into pre-prepared questions that our committee has prepared to ask the candidates for governor. Those will be asked in a round robin style. And so Paula, our secretary, give me one moment, Paula, to unmute you. Paula, if you'll go ahead and come on board. Paula is going to administer the first question to our candidates. And Paula, you have the floor.
Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody, and I will pose the first question of the night to our candidates for governor. The voters of every district are demanding improvements to our crumbling roads and crucial infrastructure. What do you see as the biggest obstacle? And if elected, what steps would you take as governor to improve road conditions and infrastructure? Please include in your answer something specifically addressing the broadband accessibility issue. And for that, we will go to Doug Six first. I am not host, Ethan. So Doug, do you know how to unmute? There you go. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your question is very true. Our roads are in very, very poor shape, and they have continued to get that way for several years. It's going to take more than 1 year to fix our roads. That question gets posed to me every day, many, many times. Are you going to fix my roads? The only way to get the roads into good repair is going to be to prepare a good plan that will allow us to repair, replace, and maintain roads at the same time. I'm sure that the COVID virus is going to affect anything that we're going to be able to do because of the funds that may be available. However, we need to get a plan together That plan needs to be publicly posted so that everyone knows where they are on that plan. I've been in contact with several asphalt experts to try and figure out how we can make our roads last longer, less maintenance, work on those roads that need it the most to begin with, and begin to put those roads back in shape that our individuals out there can maintain without running to a fire every day and trying to put it out because a road is falling over the hill or the potholes are so deep that the car is stuck in it. We've got an issue with all of our infrastructure in our state. A lot of the small towns, the infrastructure is falling apart. They don't have the money to put the infrastructure back into good repair. The residents are sitting there paying exorbitant amounts of money for their sewage, their water, etc. And we need to address that for all of our small communities, especially those that house a lot of our elderly who are on fixed incomes. As far as the broadband goes, I've been in contact with several folks about broadband. Yes, 5G is an option. There are already companies that are going through our state that have received grants, to my understanding, and are installing broadband or fiber in some of the areas, but there are a lot of areas in our state that are going to require a lot of work just to get broadband to it. Having companies go through our state without a plan is not going to resolve our broadband issue. Our state needs to come up with a good plan, put it to practice and make it stick. And I believe I do have a plan that will do that for our state. Our plan for our roads, I believe that we have individuals that work in our Department of Highways that their hands are tied. We need to hold them accountable. We need to hold all of our state employees accountable for what they do and their actions that they take. That includes the governor of the state. And I would be held accountable by all of the constituents that would vote for me if I became governor. I would expect you to hold me totally accountable for anything I do or decisions that I make. So I appreciate the time to answer that question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Six. Mr. Lunsford, please go ahead with your answer.
All right, thank you again. With our situation in West Virginia, I read an article in Executive Magazine a while back by an economist at WVU. His name is Mr. Deskins. You all are probably familiar with him. He said that only 54% of our population works. So out of 1.8 million people, roughly 900,000 people work, but 1.8 million are using the facilities. So we've got all these people that are using the roads, all these people that are using the water, and it's a wear and tear on the system. So the number one thing we need are new people to come to the state. And we can't get them to come here until, as Doug Six said, we've got to fix the roads. What I would propose on that is to take these displaced coal miners that have built some of the best roads and bridges in the world up to these coal mines, and I would organize 55 counties that these employees would own themselves, one in each county that would supplement the current state road workers and would supplement the paving companies, which are just running wide open on some of these big interstate jobs. So that would be an opportunity, because we're getting people in the state road that have their CDLs, they're making $12 an hour. So as soon as they get the CDLs, guess what? Everybody and their brother's trying to hire these people, so they can't keep good people at the state road. So that's a part of the problem too. So water is a big thing. We want to talk about broadband, and I'm exactly with Doug Six on that. We can't just jump out here and just have everybody running in different directions on that, because we should have learned our lesson with Frontier on just turning people loose with a big bunch of money. But before we get to broadband, let's talk about the water lines. You want to see a property increase in value, run a city or public water line. I had a deal here in Cabell County not too long ago. All the realtors, all the big shots said, this 53-acre farm is worth $150,000. And the guy said, what can I get out of it? I said, I'll get you $400,000 out of it. And everybody told me I was crazy. But what happened is, because it had city water and it only needed a 2-acre lot in order to get a septic tank approval or an aerator approval, we were able to cut off 3 or 4 lots, and it made the property worth a whole lot more. So we need a lot of city water in these different places. That's going to improve the property values way more than anything else. And then once again, on the broadband, I've talked to people also. I worked with these people in the state of Ohio. They've developed most of the cable systems. So before we go out here and give all these millions of dollars away, and people are out here running in all these different directions saying we're putting in fiber, I'd like to slow that down. And I hate to see something stuck on a pole where every time the wind blows, the cable and the electric goes out. So I'd much rather see it go underground. I know it costs a lot of money. Then I would like to get in here when we talk about broadband and Unlink and Frontier and Comcast and all these companies that are losing subscribers. And so their service is waning because they're not reinvesting the money into the infrastructure, which is what this is all about. Nobody's reinvesting money into the water, into the sewer, into the broadband. And now we're just, even our roads, you can just see it it's just all dropped. The ball's been dropped on all this. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Mr. Wansford. Okay, Mr. Folk, I'm going to unmute you. Please go ahead with your response. There you go.
All right. I've been all over the state. I've driven Route 50, Route 2, Route 250, 219, 119, 8. And the one common thing that I see is the fact that slips are not being fixed. Some of them, the one on Route 2 north of Point Pleasant has been a one-way stoplight for probably close to 2 years. So prioritizing slips, and then I've also recently got some information on bridges up in your area. Some people sent me some pictures of bridges that need to be fixed. So prioritizing things a little bit better than they are would definitely be number one. Number two, I think it's very important that we get to be a little bit more honest, and that doesn't just go with DOH, but everything in the state of West Virginia. There's not a lot of honesty and transparency. As an example, when they were pushing the road bond, they were proposing to do almost $1.9 billion worth of projects with a $1.6 billion bond. Unless you're using Common Core math, that doesn't work. Waste and inefficiency. And I'll give you one example of waste that is just anybody that's driven a back road in the state of West Virginia. And I don't know how much the dollar figure is, but there's a sign that says Roads to Prosperity Project on the smallest little back road in Hampshire County. And I've seen it all over the state. I don't know how much those signs cost, but it's a waste of money. Another example of waste is in that same bond issue list of projects was a road to repairing or replacing a bridge that the only thing on the other side of the bridge was a coal mine that was vacant and not being operated. So we have to really change our paradigm. I've had many frontline DOH employees give examples of where we could save money in bidding out materials as an example, stuff that you could find at Lowe's or Home Depot, conduit for electrical, to run electric lines are literally they're paying 4 times what they would pay at Lowe's for them. $1, something that would cost $1 at Lowe's or Home Depot, they're paying $4 for through these state contracts that are obviously not very competitively bid. Specifically to broadband, we have every road is a right-of-way. We are not using our right-of-ways efficiently to improve access to broadband. So we need to change that. We have done a little bit of that in the legislature. And the other thing that I think is big in the future, and this is from my travels all over the country and all over the world as a pilot, is we need to use, especially in our rural nature with the mountains and stuff, we need to use towers more. And some are starting to do that, putting some, especially in the towns. You mentioned 5G. The limitation on 5G is actually distance. You have to shoot it. It only shoots so far. You have to, and my father-in-law, who's an electrical engineer, said the ideal place to put 5G, if you ever do it, is actually going to be on your utility poles because it has a restriction on distance. I'm still not convinced on 5G though. I will tell you that. I've got a lot of good internet in certain places without using 5G. Obviously, having a good trunk line is the key thing. So waste and inefficiency, honesty and transparency. It's not there. It hasn't been there. And that's one thing that I've been known for in the legislature, and I would bring to the office of governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Folk. Next is Mr. Sheedy. Go ahead.
Thank
You got to unmute.
back and look at the historical background from highways. Go back to 1933 when highways was first formed. That's when the Republicans were in charge of the Senate last and the House. After that, there was 80 plus years where the Democrats took control. That's when highways actually started crumbling. And to most recently, you can look at equipment being sold off to balance budgets, personnel being cut to balance budgets. Now we're to the point where we have a commissioner / secretary. Now make that two of those. And then we have contract individuals to help them do their job while we don't have enough workers on the road to work safely on the road. I know this. I worked there. I've heard one of the other candidates mention he wanted to re-implement the core plan. The core plan is nothing more than a maintenance management tool that currently does not work, cannot work. So to implement that, you're setting up Department of Highways for failure. The reason why it won't work because you don't have the people or the equipment to make it work. My first thing would be to eliminate the secretary. Because number one, the secretary has no legislative authority. The legislative authority is granted to the commissioner by the legislature. The secretary has none. That is one position that could be eliminated right off the bat, start making smaller government and afford to have some more people working down at the lower levels. You're also eliminating a communications issue right there between highways and the governor. Now you have a direct link from highways to the governor. You don't have a buffer in between there that person is only reportable to the governor. Now you've got the commissioner that is reportable to both the legislature and the governor. Next thing you need to do, you need to start getting wages up. You need to get wages up. One of the other candidates briefly mentioned that before. You're starting them off at $12 an hour and requiring them to get a CDL. It's not long before these guys that go in and get their CDLs take a hike down the road, and the state has them sign a paper that says they can't do that. Paper it's wrote on isn't worth anything for the simple fact of the matter that you've got no authority over what their personal possession is. Their personal possession is their CDL, their commercial driver's license. We've got sewer systems in the state that are non-existent. The reason they're non-existent is because in the past, they were forced to take sanitary sewers and completely make them sanitary, take the storm sewers out. Well, that's all well and fine and good that they did that, but there was no money put aside for stormwater runoff. So now you've got that issue going on, and a lot of these smaller communities cannot afford to install these storm sewers or anything like that. Broadband, that's one of the worst things that we have in our state right now, and one of the worst things that's holding people back. We've got to be able to get broadband up and running and get it worthwhile in the state. I don't know how my picture is coming through here, but this is through a satellite link. So, and this is the first time that we've ever been able to get Zoom to work here. So, yeah, broadband, that's another big step that needs to be taken in the right direction. And all of those things fixed are going to start bringing people back, along with some other issues that I've already.
Thank you, Mr. Sheedy. And the last on this question is Mr. Thrasher.
When we talk about infrastructure, that's absolutely critical to West Virginia's future. I know a lot about infrastructure. Let's start with the highways. First and foremost, I think we need a reorganization of the highway department. They are not effective and efficient in how they spend money. Everything is Charleston-centric. The different districts have very little latitude to approach problems their own way. So we need to decentralize the highway department, give local districts more authority. Secondly, when you look at our primary and secondary roads, there are fundamental things we need to do, and it's called drainage, drainage, and drainage. We need to pull ditch lines, open up culverts, and fix potholes. Now, the first thing you do is correct the drainage situation, because once you have the drainage situation corrected, it gets the water out from underneath that road, and then you can go in and pave it and do whatever things you need to do, and it's a good investment. But drainage has to be done first. Adhere to the basics. Let's move to water and sewer. Within West Virginia, those water and sewer projects are all administered by the West Virginia Infrastructure Jobs and Development Council. They typically have somewhere between $200 and $250 million in accounts. That money needs to be put to work immediately. It is a long, cumbersome process to get those monies released. Those need to be put out so water and sewer projects can be built across the state. I do water and sewer projects in 6 different states. West Virginia takes the longest. In West Virginia, you have 4 separate engineering reviews: the Highway Department, the Health Department, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Public Service Commission. If you go to Maryland, Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, or Pennsylvania, you have 2 reviews, not the 4 that we have. Typically, those projects go in about half the time West Virginia projects go. We are way too overregulated in the state. We don't need 4 separate engineering sections reviewing water and sewer plans. That's one example of many. Let's move over to other utilities that weren't mentioned, but gas is a critical component to our infrastructure. Some places in our state that you would think would have gas don't, like the Eastern Panhandle, and it's a huge drag on the ability to develop their economy. We proposed a very large gas line that went from our gas fields over the Eastern Panhandle. Unfortunately, it has been fought vigorously by environmental firms, and the state has not been behind it to the extent that have. We should get our gas over to the Eastern Panhandle. Let's talk about the most important of all infrastructure, and that is broadband. And the reason it's the most important is because if you don't have broadband in a community, that community will die. No ifs, ands, or buts. West Virginia is 50th in broadband, even after Frontier received the largest grant per capita in the country to improve broadband in West Virginia. Frontier had a complete stranglehold over broadband in West Virginia. That's why when I was Secretary of Commerce, I proposed legislation which was passed, which created a fund that said if an entrepreneur can get 50% of their money for broadband, the state will loan them the other 50%. A good example is just north of Mon County in Brewston Mills in Preston County, where a 29-year-old entrepreneur went to Clear Mountain Bank. They loaned him 50% of the money. The state loaned him the other 50%. The thing was in operating, functioning within 9 months. They had been waiting for 10 years from Frontier. So we need to open it up to competitive entrepreneurial people to do it. And finally, the state needs to put money into it. When I was Secretary of Commerce, for the first time, we found out that we could use abandoned mine lands money to actually use that money to extend broadband. We spent over $30 million in 2 years using that money to extend broadband to West Virginia. As I said, it's the #1 issue. If we don't solve this broadband issue, West Virginia is destined to continue to be 50th and lag further and further behind. Thank you.
And thank you, Woody, for those words. I'm going to jump in here for just a second, Kyle, before you start. And again, welcome our viewers who are watching via Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Our audience is growing. It fluctuates as these things go. But if you do have a question you would like to have posed to the panelists and you're watching via Facebook Live or YouTube Live, please share it in the comments there. We're filtering those the best we can, and we'll present them as time allows. Again, we have panelists with us tonight who are running for governor, who are running for offices in the Board of Public Works. And so we will do the best that we can as time allows. Next up will be our Vice Chair, Kyle McAvoy, who's going to present question number 2 to our candidates for governor. But we do appreciate our viewers. We'd ask that you share your questions and we will pose them as time allows. Kyle?
All right, thank you. Thank you for turning it over here. I'm going to go ahead and move right along with the next question. As governor, you will prepare a budget to send to the legislature, who will approve and allocate the funds. When elected, how do you address the looming burden of budget shortfalls that will result from the coming budget year and future budget years as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic and other pre-existing conditions of our state's economy? I'm going to open the floor up to Mr. Lunsford. Give me just a moment to unmute you. There you go. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, I'll tell you what I saw on Moody's the other day, and you all have probably seen it, but they estimate our budget shortfall is going to be at over $1 billion here in West Virginia due to this virus. So I hope that all of our states have learned we need to come together and take the power away from the federal government because they're simply driving us into the dirt. Our personal income tax in West Virginia is $2 billion of our budget, and the federal government only sends us $4 billion. So can you see, I mean, all the tax money on the federal level we're paying in, we're getting very little in return. And then what they do send to us, they're trying to tell us how to run it on the foster care, the crippling of education, where 1/6 of our budget goes to that, and our education system's failing. So now we've already been dealing with all that, but what is the new way? How quickly can we get new people into West Virginia? And that's why I focus a lot on tourism. I focus on targeting people in Pittsburgh and Baltimore and Columbus and Charlotte, Lexington, and saying we've got a beautiful countryside. We're going to get out here and build cabins. We're going to build affordable housing that could qualify for not first time home buyers, but qualify for second homes with interest rates being low, a house at $100,000, payments $400 or $500 a month. Maybe they want to buy a cabin and put in a state park, or a cabin out here and put in private land and rent it out. That will bring people right now, because we don't have time for a 5-year plan. We don't have time for a 10-year plan. We've got to get on this right now. And just like when you're going on a camping trip and you start searching for sleeping bags and all of a sudden all this camping gear comes to you, we can target people that same way that are looking for second homes, that are looking for scenic places and getaways, and we can get them to West Virginia, because I tell you, this virus has proven to these folks living in these big crowded cities, they're going to want to get out of Dodge. So if we get the broadband where it needs to be, and we get that water and that sewer out there, people will come to West Virginia, because we're right in the middle of 75% of the population. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for the answer. I'm going to go ahead and move right along to our next candidate, and that's Mr. Folk. Give me just a moment here to unmute you. The floor is yours, sir.
There? Okay, yeah. This is the question that I've got a little experience with. In 2017, the current governor and one of the major candidates' solution to a major budget shortfall was tax increases, $450 million. Both, of course, it was proposed by Governor Justice and supported by Bob Woody. I know he's changed his tune now, but the fact is, at that time, he's on record in a mid-February 2017 article by Brad McElhaney on Metro News. And so, first of all, our budget right now has what they call reappropriated dollars in it. Unlike the federal government, if you don't spend it, you get to you lose it. In the case of West Virginia's agencies, they get to carry it over and they hoard it, and it's become slush funds for various agencies. At the last time I saw the number on that, it was between $300 and $400 million in reappropriated dollars in the various agencies. That can be touched. There's others, actually some that are constitutionally restricted that have massive amounts too. The second thing you have to do, so you have to cut spending if you have the situation that it appears we're definitely going to have, which is very tight budget years. And the other way is you reduce costs. And one of the biggest costs to both the state and the taxpayers individually, as far as their lives and their budget, their home budgets, is healthcare. So you can reduce. I mean, there was a study done, and actually it was actually done in Indiana. It's been in effect for over 10 years at the state level for their state employees, where they implemented two simple things: price transparency. In other words, you can see the price tag on your healthcare services you're getting, and a deductible security plan, high deductible plan, where we fund an HSA for the state employees. Those two things combined save 75% in the state of Indiana. Now, if you would equate that to West Virginia, the last annual budget or annual report I looked at for PEIA, those two things alone, I mean, the budget was about $600 million of state taxpayer money was spent on the PEIA program for our public employees. If we would implement those two simple things that Indiana did and get even close to similar results, obviously, if we did if we get the same results as them, it would be 75%. I don't think that's necessarily realistic for West Virginia, because our aging population and we're not quite as healthy as other states. But if we could even get 40 to 50% savings, that's anywhere between $250 and $300 million in savings. That goes a long way to close that budget gap. Another thing that we could do that would also help in healthcare costs is get rid of the certificate of need, which prevents competition in healthcare. This was a law, a mandate from the federal government that was repealed. It was passed in '74 by the federal government. West Virginia passed their law in '77. It was supposed to reduce costs, increase access, and increase quality. It did none of those three. It did the opposite. It increased costs, decreased quality, and decreased access. It was so bad that Congress actually repealed that federal mandate. Since then, about 15 states have repealed it. The Mercatus Center out of George Mason said the average savings from healthcare costs on that was 5%. Like I said, 15 or 16 other states have already repealed that. Other states have greatly reduced those things that are subject to the certificate of need, as West Virginia has the 6th most expansive certificate of need law in the state. We could greatly reduce our cost in healthcare by allowing a free enterprise, free market healthcare system, which I think we need to do. Those are the big things, along with I was a sponsor of many bills to abolish different things. Higher Education Policy Commission is unneeded. Every college and university has a board of governors that could easily govern them. The direct savings in that alone is $3 to $5 million. I could go on and on, but that would be on line items that could be saved in the budget. I have prepared a budget, which became the blueprint for the budget that was both vetoed on a silver platter with a cow pie, and also that became law in mid-June of that year, I believe, without the signature of the current governor. And anyway, that's I pretty much know the budget, so appreciate the question.
All right, thank you. Give me just a moment here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Thrasher. Give me just a moment, Mr. Thrasher. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. We've got a real budget crisis in West Virginia. I can't emphasize that enough. We have a huge issue, and it's for a combination of reasons. First, we spend too much in state government. West Virginia is the 4th highest spending of state government per capita in the country. There's no reason we should be 4th from the top. We should be middle of the pack. We need to get creative ways to reduce that. One is through attrition. We have too many state workers, and we could reduce that through attrition without firing a whole bunch of people, but begin to bring those numbers down where they should be. Now, when you look at where we're going to save money, you have to realize that some things we have to invest more money in, and some things we have to invest less money in. So let me use this opportunity to correct Michael. Michael, I was not proponent of that increase. What I was a proponent of was increasing the amount of money that went to the development office. The development office competes with Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Kentucky, and Ohio for jobs. And in, day out, West Virginia gets its butt kicked. So we need to ramp up our development office that helps grow existing businesses within West Virginia. We also need to be really effective at attracting those outside companies to come into West Virginia. I sponsored, and I was the one that began the initiative to repeal the machine and inventory tax, the biggest single impediment we have to bringing in new industry into West Virginia. Now, just like we have to control spending, we also have to bring more money in. West Virginia has lost more population than any state in the union for the last 20 years. The reason is because we have never diversified our economy. We still are so tied into resource extraction. We are a one-trick pony. This diversification of our economy should have begun decades ago, but better late than never. I have looked at the state of West Virginia and broken it down into 5 different areas: Southern Coalfields, North Central West Virginia, Eastern Panhandle, Western part, and Northern Panhandle. Each one has its own unique characteristics and opportunities for economic development. But let me tell you something. You can't continually have a state that's in economic decline for decades and not have a real train wreck ahead of you. What we have to do is to grow our economy. And we can do that a variety of ways. We just need to put the effort into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me just a moment here. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mr. Six. Mr. Six, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, our state is going to have quite a shortfall. We shutting the state down like it was shut down, just like the other states around us, is going to put a drastic reduction of dollars into our state. I agree with, I can repeat and mimic most of the things that have been said. Our state needs to be just like everyone else. We have individuals out there that sit down at their table every night and figure out how they're going to pay their bills. Our state needs to pay its bills, but we need to cut our costs. We need to cut our expenditures. Yes, we need to make the correct choices when we go to cut those expenditures. But the other side of that coin is we need to be able to generate income. Income gets generated in our state by the things that our state has to offer the world. Our state has more of its resources, the natural resources that we can put to work for our state and for our state citizens. You know, we sat and we allowed the past administrations to take away our jobs for our coal miners. We let them take away our jobs now for our gas companies. Everyone's mentioned the gas lines. We need to get rid of the regulations. We need to be backing these companies. These companies, though, need to come into our state and actually make an investment in our state. Determine that they want to be here. We don't need companies that are just coming in and pillaging our state and walking away without giving our people a good living, making sure that they get paid properly, and making sure that they can take care of their families. That's part of the problem. That's why people leave our state. They leave our state to go and try and become or take care of their families in a better way. That's what they believe. West Virginia has a tremendous amount to offer each and every individual. We have great citizens with the correct training that we can entice companies to come to our state. But we have lost our training. Our education system has lost its way for the training. It needs to be revamped. Our teachers are not taken care of the proper way. They're put into situations that they cannot ever succeed in. And our children are put into situations that cause them not to be able to succeed. And that makes it so that when individual companies look at coming into our state, they don't see a state that's going to give them the workforce that they're looking for. Yes, our infrastructure needs to be fixed, and it can be fixed. We have missed out. We had many, many companies in our state that wanted to do things that we could have used that money that they were spending to go and get permits and spend extra money because of our onerous system that just created so much trouble to get permits. So we really need to get behind the companies and behind what's going on in the world out there and put our people to work and put our resources to work for our state, not every other state around us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Sheedy. Give me just a moment here, sir.
Okay, gotcha.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir. Everybody wants to know why so many people are leaving the state. I can tell you one big reason why people are leaving the state. There are several. One big reason people are leaving the state are taxes. West Virginia pays the highest tax rate of any neighboring state. We pay taxes at a higher rate on the lowest amount of earners than what you can have in any other state. People making $18,000 a year are paying the most in taxes. They're paying the highest rate of taxes. That should not be. Those people should not be paying the most in taxes. Federal statistics for poverty are $18,800 a year. If you make less than that, you're living in poverty. Well, guess what? We're charging the 6% tax rate to people that only make $18,000 a year. We charge our senior citizens, our retirees, our pensioners income taxes. You want to know a state that doesn't do that? Florida, Texas. Populations are multiplying. I don't know how many state employees I know that have moved to Florida so they don't pay taxes on their pension, don't pay taxes on their income after they've retired and their Social Security. That's another big thing right there. We have to diversify. Coal, we just had a recent coal mine closing up here. Bob Murray, he's filing bankruptcy. He's probably going to lose some of his coal mines if they're not taken over by another company, the parent company that he bought them off of. We're going to lose a big chunk of revenue right there. And why? Because we haven't diversified. I think Mr. Thrasher said before, should have been done. He said 20. I say should have been done 40 years ago, should have been diversified. But no, they were just riding along with blinders on and everything was good. Well, fine. Now it's not. What's going to happen when COVID-19 comes up again next year and everything has to be shut down again? It's not going to be any better. And like it was said, we need to get smaller government. All of these administrative positions that are supervisory and whatever, they need to go away, and we need workers. We need workers on the roads. These guys that have worked on the roads, and I know I worked there, working unsafe for the last 20 plus years. There's not enough people there to do the work safely. So you want to keep things going, you got to have infrastructure there, but you can't keep it without the people and without the money. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sheedy. We appreciate your time and your thoughtful questions. We're going to transition now into questions and responses from our candidates for other statewide offices. First up will be incumbent Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. Give me 1 minute. Attorney General, I've got you unmuted. Welcome. Let's make sure your microphone's working, your audio's working. How are we looking there?
How are we doing? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. It's just a little muffled, but I think it'll settle down there.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Well, that sounds good. Tell me when you're ready to go.
Okay, we're good. We're good to go. Your question, Mr. Morrisey, what was the proudest accomplishment of your term in office, And what is your vision for the future? What do you want to accomplish if reelected?
Well, first of all, I'm really just grateful for the opportunity to be with you today. I think when you look back over the last 8 years, we've been in the trenches fighting for so many of the important changes here in West Virginia that our president holds. And in fact, I've been very proud to serve as President Trump top legal ally in the state of West Virginia, working closely with him to defend many of his policies that are being brutally assaulted by the far left. The reality is that we've been able to make significant improvements in the Attorney General's office that matter to the lives of West Virginians. When asked about the biggest accomplishments, I think that we have to go through, there's so many key parts of the AG's office, but when you think about it, an Attorney General needs to uphold the rule of law and make sure that he's fighting these job-killing regulations that anyone may put in place. We took the lead nationally to fight off Obama-era overreach, and we were very successful. We saved many thousands of jobs, defeating the Obama power plan in court. I know that the thousands of hardworking families that appreciate that we stopped those policies dead in their tracks, boy, I think that they were very happy they could feed their families and continue living the West Virginia dream. We know that when we took the lead to fight the Waters of the United States rule, another policy that would have crushed West Virginia economically, we were able to work with a broad coalition of over 30 states, helping to take the lead and defeat that terrible policy. When you look at what we're doing now, we're leading nationally against the effort to shut down the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. If we win at the end of this U.S. Supreme Court term in June, we will probably save thousands of jobs. In each case, if you have a good attorney general who not only can put forth strong legal actions, but proactively tries to defend her citizens from regulatory assault and from illegal activity, you could make a big difference. So I'd say protecting the hardworking families of West Virginia from the illegal actions, saving so many thousands of jobs. The second area where I think we've made a huge difference relates to opioid abuse. People may not realize this, but if you go back to 2012, there was no substance abuse fighting unit in the Attorney General's office. We've changed that. We've actually had a comprehensive approach to attack the problem holistically from a supply, a demand, and an educational perspective. We've had incredible victories in court and have positioned the state in terms of this litigation to do very, very well, contrary to the tens of millions of dollars of ads that have said the opposite. We've also taken steps which I think will make a difference for decades to come. When I got to the Attorney General's office, the federal DEA was running out of control in terms of approving the total number of pills that could be manufactured and distributed in our state. West Virginia, my office alone, stepped up. We sued the DEA. We forced the DEA to rewrite the national drug quota rules. And since 2015, when we started this fight, illicit drug prescriptions in West Virginia down 51%. That's 51%. That's making a huge difference. We've added investigators. We literally had none when I started in the office. We had a friends and family plan that was looking out more for friends of the Attorney General's office instead of the people of the state. We've stepped up and we've made sure that we go after fraud aggressively. That means consumer fraud. We've been able to save over $370 million for West Virginians. And that doesn't even include maintaining a lot of the existing streams of money that comes in tobacco settlement and in other areas. I have proactively and voluntarily returned over $50 million back to the state general fund and to our consumers. That's critical. You need someone who's going to be aggressive in returning money back to the legislature and writing and work every day to protect the state's interest, not his own interest. We've made a difference there. We've also stepped up to make sure that West Virginia values are protected in a way that people haven't seen before. Why do we have a lot of the provisions that are in effect? 38 states where we have gun reciprocity agreements. We've stepped up and we've made that difference. We've worked collaboratively with the legislature. When there was an effort to block the pain capable bill, your attorney general stepped up, said he would defend it in court. We work with the legislature to override the veto, and we've been pushing pro-life policies ever since because human life is precious, and we need to make sure we keep a strong attorney general in place. We've also taken on consumer issues, and we've been enforcing our law evenly. On broadband, we had the largest state settlement in West Virginia history. We have to work with our governor and our legislature and others, and I would like more tools, quite frankly, to go after broadband, to be able to do even more. We're aggressive, but we need even more support to go after fraud, to go after some of the broadband challenges, and we'll do it. Now, going forward, this office is so critical that we keep it in our hands as opposed to the opposition, which looks to impose a Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Bloomberg style of governance on the citizens of our state. This election is so important here in West Virginia nationally because you're going to have someone who would join a bunch of attorneys general who would want to sue President Trump every day of the week. They've been doing that. They're trying to defeat his agenda. My approach would be the opposite. We're going to work closely with the president. And also, we're going to bring the significant experience that I have to address some of the core issues of COVID-19. The reality is that COVID-19 is a game changer, and it is the major point of discussion and will be throughout the rest of the campaign. We need to keep West Virginia safe from public health threats, but we also have to have someone in place in the Attorney General's office who will look out for constitutional freedoms. Your First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment rights do not go out the window during a pandemic. You need someone who understands the Constitution and who will protect it. And also someone who's going to be in a position to guard against the threats to liberty that are out there. Now, I have been very fortunate to serve as your Attorney General. I want to make sure that people know we've been able to act and do things in our state that haven't been seen before. But with the right support, with the legislature, the Board of Public Works, and the governor, West Virginians will continue to be proud that their Attorney General is not only operating in office with the utmost in professionalism and integrity, but that there's a leader in place that's actually working to fight and to ensure that our values are being upheld every day. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to jump in there. Just, Patrick, I think you're having a little trouble with the mic or your connectivity. We appreciate your answer very much, Attorney General Patrick Morrissey. We thank you for that. We're going to, I'm going to have to ask Mr. Folk, please stop sharing your screen during other speakers. And so, Patrick, I'm going to come back to you. You have a few more comments to add, and then we're going to move on to Secretary of State Mac Warner.
Yeah, fire away.
No. Did you have something to conclude with there? We kind of dropped off with your connectivity. I'm sorry.
I think it's so critical. Right now, let's focus on COVID-19 for a moment. Got a lot of thoughtful people on this call watching. This is an issue that we need a plan for reopening. It has to have specifics, and it has to have interaction with many of the business leaders and the public health experts in the state. And quite frankly, it needs an important legal review as well. I spent part of my day dealing with issues trying to stop potential positive COVID-19 prisoners from coming in to our state. But we were able to work with local officials, and I got on the phone with the Bureau of Prisons, and we received a commitment that at least positive COVID-19 prisoners will not be coming to Hazleton. And I think that's a big relief for many of the citizens in Monongalia County and in Preston County. We need someone with the experience who knows how to work with other people, who knows regulatory policy, who cares about deregulation. We push very hard for telemedicine, and we want to make sure that's dramatically expanded in the upcoming years. There's no reason why there should be a system in place where telemedicine is a different legal standard now than it does during normal times. We need to look at certificate need. We need to take those aggressive deregulatory policies and get good counsel from the Attorney General who could help in the interactions with the federal government and the liability issues and bankruptcy issues that are coming our way. That's why I'm excited to run as Attorney General, and I certainly am not going to allow a very liberal occupant who doesn't represent West Virginia values hold this office.
Very good. Thank you, Attorney General Morrissey. We appreciate your time there. We did give you a little extra allowance because we had some technical difficulty, but we appreciate your thoughtful and thorough response. Next, we're going to go to our incumbent Secretary of State, Mac Warner, and I'll pose the question to you, Mac. I do have your microphone unmuted. Make sure you're connected with us here and ready to go.
Ethan, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mac. Thank you for
Okay, good.
checking in here.
Sure.
So the question for you, Mac, is the same as we had for Mr. Morrissey. What was the proudest accomplishment of your term in office, and what is your vision for the future? What do you want to accomplish if reelected? Go ahead, Mac.
Thank you, Ethan. Right now, ESPN is showing the series The Last Dance, and it's about the transformation of the Bulls. Chicago used to have the Bears and the Cubs and the Sox, but nobody even knew that they had a basketball team until management decided to make some major transformational moves. And when they did that, they put a team on the court, but even with somebody like a Michael Jordan, that wasn't enough to win the championship. They had to have the coach, the Phil Jackson, they had to have the supporting characters, Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman. And when they had those pieces in place, then they started giving the fans what they wanted. The fans didn't see the backroom transformational maneuvering. What they saw was people on the court winning ball games. So here in the Secretary of State's office, we came in with a transformational plan. It's a lot of things that people may not see, but that plan was this continuity of operations, a digitally changing, not just incremental changes, but transforming the Secretary of State's office. So what you're not seeing behind the scenes are things like the enterprise registration licensing system, the one-stop business portal, the campaign finance laws that have changed. These are going to have long-term ramifications to positively change West Virginia. But what the fans want to see, what the voters want to see, is they want to see wins on the court. So wins on the court or in the elections arena, the easy to vote and hard to cheat implementation that we've had with the Secretary of State's office. So the easy to vote, we are leading the nation. West Virginia, little old West Virginia, has more ways to vote than any other state in the nation. You can vote in person, early voting, you can vote on election day, you can do the absentee voting, and for a segment of society, whether it's the military serving overseas or voters with disability, they can vote electronically. We led the nation in that in 2018. We're leading it again in 2020, and now other states are starting to follow West Virginia's lead. As far as the hard to cheat, folks, we've taken off over 190,000 names. That's 190,000 opportunities for fraud to occur. And we've identified literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands more that will come off after this next election. We are working it so it's hard to cheat. We've increased the investigations division within the office 4 times what it was before. And we've teamed up with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General, State Police, FBI, so that we're going to take election problems and fraud seriously here in this state and investigate it when it happens. Now, on the business and licensing side, I'm most proud about things like our call center. That literally is transforming when you talk about smaller government, because of our state-of-the-art call center application and the business one-stop. That was talked about for decades. My predecessor, 8 years in office, never got it done. We got it done in the first year that I was in office. And then election night reporting. All of these are things that people are seeing. It's like watching a basketball. You can see it on election night. You can see it when you go into the business and licensing or the business one stop when you're trying to start your business. Those are wins that people are seeing here in the state. So what is the future? The future is continuing this transformation, extending that call center across state government. When you do that and you digitally transform the office, when you put the UCC online, when you put business registrations online, we have cut the office of the Secretary of State 15%. You talk about smaller government, there it is, in action, a win for the state of West Virginia. And folks, don't take it for granted. This voting in person, it is under assault. Natalie Tennant wants it gone.
Nancy Pelosi wants it gone. Joe Biden wants it gone. They want to take that right of yours to vote in person away and go to this vote by mail system. It is filled with fraud opportunities. While I'm Secretary of State, you're going to hear me fighting for us to have all those options. And that's what I want to continue to do when I'm reelected to office. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you this evening.
Very good. Thank you, Secretary Warner. We appreciate your time and your thoughtful answer. We're going, I understand we've got lots of viewers watching on Facebook. We fluctuated. Our audience has grown and dipped, and that's the way that that live feed goes. I wanted to deviate a little bit there. We do have one more question for our governors, our candidates for governor. And then I'm sorry to make so many candidates have to set. We're getting questions on Facebook, and we're going to get to those, and we're going to do everything that we can to be in a timely manner. And I do apologize for having some set and not be able to speak just yet, but we are getting there. I'm going to jump back for just a minute. We do have a third question for our candidates for governor. And it's a broad, a big question, and I understand that we could all go on at length about this topic, but just in the interest of brevity and in the interest of other speakers on this forum having an opportunity to speak, I would ask that our candidates for governor please think brief, keep it short if they can, and be terse and to the point. It certainly will be appreciated, but we'll give you plenty of opportunity to speak. Just please be mindful that there are other candidates that do wish to address the topic as well. So to our Facebook Live viewers, our YouTube Live viewers, we welcome your comments and your questions. Please pose them there in the comments field. We're having those delivered to us so that we can pose them. To our other candidates for Board of Public Works, we're coming to you as soon as we can. I apologize for the lag. I apologize for seemingly having you hold on the line with not an opportunity to speak. But we are coming to you as soon as we can. We're going to jump back to our candidates for governor for just a minute. The question is posed is, when elected as governor, what actions would you take as West Virginia's visible leader to improve West Virginia's business climate and attract lucrative new businesses to our state? Again, please, your brevity will be rewarded. We're going to start first with Mr. Thrasher, and then we'll go to Mr. Six. Mr. Thrasher, give me one moment to unmute you. Okay, Mr. Thrasher, you are unmuted and have the floor again. Please address the question quickly and allow us to go move on in our forum.
When I was Secretary of Commerce, I promoted an idea to change the image of West Virginia. We start that by tourism and educating people outside West Virginia what the real West Virginia is about. At the same time, we educate West Virginians just how much they have to be proud of. Once we change that perception of what West Virginia is about, which has begun to happen and can happen much quicker, we need to do the same image change to businesses that look at places to locate. West Virginia enjoys an incredible quality of life. That is typically number 3 on companies' checklists that are looking for locations to come. So we need to educate people on what an incredible quality of life we have and what opportunities we have. West Virginia still provides the best workforce of essentially anybody in the country. You can see how all our college graduates that leave and are successful around the world, and you look at our vocational graduates, which are scooped up by all our surrounding states. So we need to provide those opportunities to keep those kids here. And if we do that, we will have a steady, good workforce. Obviously, education is a huge component. In the interest of brevity, I'm going to keep it at that. But I brought companies into West Virginia, specifically by selling the assets of West Virginia. One quick example, we export 2,500 IT graduates every year. I went to a company in Manhattan and said, hey, you can do your software generation work cheaper in West Virginia than you can in New York. Today, there are nearly 200 employees that occupy the Laley Tower. They're new graduates of West Virginia institutions. I have a track record of being able to bring companies into West Virginia and grow our economy.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Thrasher. We're going to move on to Mr. Six to answer the same question. Doug, one moment. I have you unmuted now. You have the floor. Go ahead, Mr. Six.
Thank you for the time. Yes, our economy is has the opportunity to be one of the best in the nation. We have more to offer in this state than most states have to offer. Our citizens are hardworking. Our citizens need to have the training that is required for them to succeed and be successful. Yes, we have our citizens that leave our state to go for jobs in other places. They are very successful. Successful people in our state need to have the pride of our state, and we need to get that back into our state. Our state has many, many things to offer, and if we just promote what our state is capable of doing and get our individuals on board with that and bring that pride back in, we will be able to lure those companies into the state. We fix our infrastructure, it will all come together and it will all work for the benefit of every citizen of this state. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Six. We're going to go next to Mr. Lunsford for the same question. Brooke, 1 second. Okay, I have you unmuted and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you all. I mentioned an article earlier that was in Executive Magazine that Mr. Deskins, the economist at WVU, wrote, and it talked about if 1% of the people in West Virginia that could work would go to work, it would add almost $1 billion a year to our economy. So based on that, we developed a jobs grant that can hire 100 people, 1,000 people, or 10,000 people. And it's people that don't have advanced degrees. You know, it's fantastic if you do have a college degree. It's fantastic if you're a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, and that kind of thing. But we've got a lot of people in West Virginia that we've got to come up with a job for, and we've done that. I've been in management with several Fortune 500 companies. I've been out here working as a salesperson, marketing person, pretty much for 40 years. And West Virginia has a lot to offer, and I look forward to being a part of it. And I appreciate you guys being on here today, and I look forward to working with you all.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Lunsford. Next up, we're going to go to Mr. Sheedy for a response to the same question, and then we'll come to Mr. Folk for a wrap up. Mr. Sheedy, go ahead. You do have the floor. Again, just everyone be brief and we'll move along.
All right, thank you very much, sir. My family came to West Virginia in 1802. It's quite a long time. They've served in government before, and like our founding fathers, they served and they left. That's what needs to happen in West Virginia. You need to serve and then you need to leave. First things I would do is start eliminating supervisory positions and secretary positions at the higher levels. This is going to free up money that you can move down below to actually hire workers. That's where we're hurting right now, is having workers. Another thing that you need to do is promote tourism. Get the people in the state. We have so much to do in this state. It's just so beautiful. You got hiking, you have whitewater rafting, you have anything that you want. It just needs to happen, and it's been held back for too long. The people of the state have not been able to thrive and prosper, and that is what they need to do. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ramey. We appreciate, or Mr. Sheedy, we appreciate your answer. And next up, certainly last, but certainly not least, will be Mr. Folk answering the same question. Mr. Folk, give me 1 second to get you unmuted, and you have the floor.
All right. Thank you. And, you know, I said at the beginning, the more the plans fail, the more the planners plan. I'm telling you, the biggest thing I'll bring is honesty and transparency to this office. As you can see on the screen right there, there's a quote from Mr. Thrasher, reported on by Brad McElhaney in mid-February 2017. It's from a February 15th agency hearing before the House Finance Committee, where he in fact said, if I thought the tax increases we're going to have to do to support these things were going to be counterproductive, I would not be supportive of them. In other words, he supported a tax increase. Look, it's very simple. West Virginia needs to be made more competitive with our neighboring states for business, to allow businesses to come to the state of West Virginia. The equipment and inventory tax is just one tax that is onerous to the state of West Virginia. Pennsylvania and Ohio do not have it. And all you have to do is drive down Route 2 and in the western part of the state, and you'll see empty concrete pads, empty lots, commercial lots. They don't pay the same taxes as a commercial building that's has industry housed in it. So it's not a zero-sum game. We also have to make our state more competitive from a citizen's perspective. I recently spoke to somebody that lived in North Carolina for a while and was moving back home, and they were shocked at how much their sewer, water, their various utilities, and the taxes that were associated with those were. That's a very competitive thing that needs to be done from a personal trying to get population back to the state. And also can be included in that we lose some of our most wealthier senior citizens because they don't want to pay taxes on Social Security. They move to states that don't have it, like Florida. So we need to totally eliminate the taxation of Social Security. It's the most egregious form of double taxation that we have in the state of West Virginia. And of course, I already mentioned the nickel and diming of the fees and stuff that are much higher than neighboring states too. Get back to that. The more the plans fail, the more the planners plan. The equipment inventory tax is not paid by P&G. It's not paid by Macy's over here in the Eastern Panhandle. It's not paid by Quad Graphics. It won't be paid by Rockwell. Those people were given special deals to get them here. We need to give that same opportunity to our existing small business and those entrepreneurs that want to start a business here. Perfect example is Warwood Tool, just in the north side of Wheeling. Warwood Tool has been around since the mid 1800s, but yet they still have to pay the equipment inventory tax. But a new business located here doesn't have to pay that if they're, by the planner's idea, whoever they pick to be the winner or the loser. That's what happens. And I've got a friend from high school who has a machining business over here in the Eastern Panhandle. He said his machines are $1 million machines, some of them, $250,000 to $1 million machines. He would add on to his building, which would pay commercial taxes if he did it, and house those additional machines and hire those additional employees. We have to make West Virginia more competitive. And just so everybody says you have to find a way to make up those dollars. Well, if you have a tumor in your body and you cut it out, do you replace it? No. Taxation, overtaxation that makes us uncompetitive with neighboring states is like a tumor in a body. When you remove it, you usually get better if the rest of the cancer treatments go properly. I'm telling you, we have to change our paradigm. That dollar figure from the most recent year was about $95 to $100 million for the equipment inventory tax around the state. It's not easy it wouldn't be that hard to find $100 million in our budget of waste, fraud, and abuse. I think Mr. DeSix has spoken about that. We need to treat our state budget the same way we treat our household budget. If you have to make cuts, you do it to get over. And thank you for your time.
Very good. And thank you, Mr. Folk. I apologize, Mr. Folk, about we allowed your screen sharing for a brief time so you could share your message, and then we did stop your screen sharing. So Mr. Thrasher, I believe maybe you have your camera blanked. I just wanted to give you just a brief opportunity. I believe you did address the answer. You did answer Mr. Folk's statement before, and then Mr. Folk has come back to it again. Mr. Thrasher, if you have anything, if you have a 30-second response, we'll do that and then close that subject. And if not, we'll move on. I do want to get to Commissioner Lenhart for a question. Commissioner Lenhart, if you are ready. Okay, Commissioner Lenhart, we've got you unmuted. We're going to start with a question for you. Commissioner Lenhart, what do you consider to be your greatest accomplishment as Commissioner of Agriculture, and what do you vision for the department for the coming years?
Well, like many Republicans, when we came into office, we totally transformed the Department of Agriculture. We've transformed it from a heavily regulated agency to an educate before we regulate agency. When a young farmer comes up to me and says, you know, because of the work that you've done, I gave up my teaching job. That says a lot. That means that we're doing the right things. When you talk about just changing some of the regulations, you know, the timber industry came to me the first year in office and said, the phytosanitary inspections are too difficult for the export of logs. So we went to work and we worked with our trading partners. We worked with and we worked with the USDA, and we changed those regulations and issued 1,000 more phytosanitary inspections than the previous year. That's $20,000 per load per inspection. We brought over $20 million more into West Virginia just by those simple procedures. And we've done it up and down the line. There was a DOD Fresh that helps feed the schools program. It was $42 million. The previous contract went to an Ohio company buying Ohio products and bringing them into West Virginia. That contract is now with West Virginia. So we've got example upon example of those type of things that are going on. And I've got to talk about the pandemic, COVID-19 right now. We've been extremely successful. We have kept the agricultural businesses open in West Virginia without problem, without an issue. I think that's a tremendous accomplishment, you know, because we all know we have to eat, and we've been able to keep that industry going. So that's one segment of the economy. When it gets up, when the state starts to open up again, we don't have to worry about that. We've been moving forward. And the other thing is, my department for 2020 on state tax dollars is operating on less than the department received in 2012. And we are doing a whole lot more programs. And we've gotten some other programs from other agencies, like Cedar Lakes came from Department of Ed to the Department of Agriculture. Grade A Dairy came from DHHR to the Department of Agriculture. And we're still under 2012 state dollars. So I think that's quite an accomplishment. And I'm very proud of the work my team has done in putting that together. That's good government.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Lenhart. We appreciate your time and your thoughtful answer. A couple of our public questions that had come in were regarding COVID-19 response, how it's affected our meat and poultry industry, and also if the state's agricultural community is prepared for a meat shortage. I believe you touched on both of those topics in your time there. Do you have anything further you'd like to add on those subjects?
Yes, we're actually looking into other things, and we've had some lessons learned from this. We've been working on some of the regulations in the meat industry, and the citizens will see more of that coming on. We do have tractor trailer loads of hogs coming in that would have been put down that are coming into West Virginia. West Virginia has not had to dump any milk. We actually are bringing in more raw milk because of some of the things that we've worked on. So we've helped stop some of that waste. And our meat industry is progressing very well. Our small slaughterhouses are doing very well. They're busy, they're jammed up, but I was in a grocery store today and I didn't see any shortage of meat on those shelves. So West Virginia is doing very well. And a lot of that is because of the work we've done getting ready for these things.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Lenhart. Again, we appreciate your time, your patience, and your thoughtful answer. Mr. Ramey, I'll get you unmuted there. Your question is virtually a mirror to Commissioner Lenhart's. It's two questions, actually. The first is, what would be your top priority or priorities in the first 100 days to Commissioner of Agriculture?
Yes, thank you. And hey, I appreciate you having me on here and giving me the opportunity to address this. And so the big crutch is that bureaucracy supports industrial agriculture. And so small local farms are not the same as industrial farms on a small scale. So keeping that in mind, the priorities that I'll work on is supporting those small local farms. So we're going to cut establish a staff who's not a big government bureaucracy. We just don't need the bureaucrats in the departments. Pursue a passage of a bill for open sales of raw milk. As that's a state level, and then the companion bill that Congressman Thomas Massey has at the federal level of a Farm Fresh Dairy Act. Pursue a change to the THC level for industrial hemp. Right now, it's at 0.3, and there's a lot of farmers out there that are having difficulties with that, and there's no reason why they should even have to be fighting that. The other part of that is that's kind of a two-part thing of let's consolidate the medical marijuana program under the WVDA. There's no reason to have two separate growing programs between two different departments of government. It's about growing, and it all ought to be under the Department of Ag. I'll pursue the passage of the PRIME Act at the federal level and an accompanying state bill to facilitate the growth of local meat and implement a regenerative practices within the state by eliminating harmful herbicides and pesticides on state farms. We have several state farms, and we just don't need those harmful products there. We don't use them on my farm as an example to other folks on how to farm regeneratively, and we'll demonstrate to others by the same thing at the state farms. We'll change our participation in the Food Safety Modernization Act. It's just not good for small farms, and it's really all about pushing everybody into a model for the industrial farm model. We'll implement a strategic ag plan to effectively respond to food emergencies. And of course, we're seeing that right now in many ways across the country. We could be a leader in that. Now, expanding a little bit beyond the 100 days, some big projects is a mine reclamation program where we could make use of the those old sites after they're reclaimed for food growing, everything from animals to orchards. Expand farmers markets such as the Wild Ramp, which I helped to establish in Huntington, and we need more of those around the state. This isn't your traditional tailgate farmers market. This is a year-round indoor farmers market that's operated by local volunteers, and we can use those around the state. Establish demonstration farms for regenerative practices and conduct workshops of those agricultural methods. And that's for beef, pork, broilers, eggs, orchards, slaughter, marketing, etc. And that fits also into the education piece to entice more young people to get into farming. We'll make it easy for them to do that by teaching them and make it readily available without having to go get a 4-year college degree and $50,000 in debt to just learn an industrial method that they're not going to use.
Very good, Mr. Ramey. I don't mean to cut you short there, but I did want to pose the second part of the question.
Sure.
So the other part of the question there for you as a challenger in the primary, and I'll just read it. So this is posed to you, Mr. Ramey. Seemingly a tentpole issue of your campaign has been food freedom or deregulation, sometimes to an extreme measure. The Republican Party is the party of deregulation and personal liberty, but not at the risk of public health and safety. How would you balance the interests of deregulating agriculture in West Virginia while ensuring safe and adequate food in all areas of the state? And just as a note there, Mr. Riley Moore, you'll be up right after Mr. Ramey's done speaking. So Riley, if you're you want to click back in, you'll be up right after Mr. Ramey. Mr. Ramey, go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of private activities as opposed to government. And so I would facilitate a private evaluation institution such as Underwriter Laboratories has for the electrical industry. You don't see that mandated, but everybody realizes that an electrical switch is safe when you see the UL label on it. And we don't need that from government. Private industry can do that. We need more integrity, which can come from those private activities as opposed to bureaucracy. There's not a lot of integrity in the bureaucracy, and that's got to change. uh, local farms and food empowers consumers. And it's about educating the consumers to understand what they need to look for in quality vendors and quality food. And they can know who their farmer is if they're local. They can't know it through the industrial system when you have a lettuce factory in Salinas, California. Facilitate producers to learn clean practices. So it's not about being dirty. It's about learning practices that are clean, such as raw milk standards, to have people implement those. And that's not the same as industrial practices. So right now the regulations facilitate you've got to have this particular equipment and these particular practices that industry can do, but that's not all conducive to small farms that could still implement safe practices, just not the same way industry does. And my educate plan is not simply to just educate about the rules, as my opponent wants to educate. I don't want to just teach you about what the rules are and follow the rules. It's about getting the big industry rules out of the way to begin with. So it's about standing and defending the small farmers and not the industrial farms on a small scale. So that's really the basis of my campaign, and I'm open for any additional questions. Thank you.
Very good, and thank you, Mr. Ramey. Commissioner Lenhart, if you're prepared, I'd like to come back to you for just a moment. Do you have anything you would like to add on that subject, the balance between deregulation and public safety and health?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. You know, a lot of the regulations that people are concerned about is the Department of Agriculture is partnered with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So the raw milk standards, the grade A milk standards, the Food Safety Modernization Act, those are all federal regulations that don't always apply to the small farmer. I'm a small farmer too. I made a very successful, my wife and I, we had a very successful small farm in the regulatory environment because we knew and we understood and we were educated on how to make things work. When you look at, if you take away the Food Safety Modernization Act and you take away some of the other practices my opponent wants to talk about, that tells our farmers they can't export across state lines. And how do you grow businesses if you can't export across state lines? That's the whole idea of a lot of those regulations the USDA puts on us, saying, if you want to transport your product across state lines, you will do these things. If you want to sell within the state, you don't need to worry about that. So we have many, many farmers in West Virginia that are doing just what my opponent is saying, and they're only selling state lines. Practices that he's concerned about are only for if you want to take those products across state lines. Raw milk's another thing that's more of a health department issue, but I was a proponent in the Senate of the herd sharing, where people can own a part of the cow and they can get their raw milk. It is working. It works very well. There's no need to change that. The Raw Milk Association in West Virginia doesn't want to change that regulation. They want to see herd shares grow. So I've talked with all these industries and I've talked with all these organizations out there. West Virginia's on the right track. We've got to make sure we educate our farmers. We want to make sure that our food system is safe. So I always said before, if you eat from a safe, affordable, and abundant food supply, you need to care about who your Commissioner of Agriculture is. We've demonstrated that over the last 4 years, and we're going to make it even better the next 4 years.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Lenhart. I appreciate that answer. Mr. Riley Moore, we're going to come to you. I apologize first. Let me get you off mute here, Mr. Moore. Hold on one second. Mr. Moore, I apologize for having you hold for so long. We do have a large and diverse group, and so
No problem.
We've
No
kind of come in and out and sprung away from our planned strategy. But Mr. Moore is running in the primary on June 9th as a Republican for the nomination to run in the general for state treasurer. Riley, go ahead and we'll ask you the first question. When elected, you would be our state's chief financial officer, responsible for overseeing the state government's operating funds, monitoring our state debt, as well as record management and reporting. How important is modernization and transparency to implementing those responsibilities? And as a tag along to that question, we do have a question that came in through public comment that was specifically addressing transparency. And so, Riley, it's late in the night. I'm sorry. Please feel free to spend your time as you see fit and answer the question. But I think the question is directly pointed towards transparency.
Great. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you so much for the question. And thank you for everybody who's hanging on here at the end of the event and evening. And thank you all again for hosting it. Transparency is really the cornerstone of good governance. And let me expand on that a bit and explain a little bit more of what I mean. So if you don't have transparent government, then the people who are those that are going to hold us accountable as elected officials aren't able to do so. And when you don't have accountability, you don't have transparency, you get funny business going on in these offices. It is absolutely critical, particularly in the state treasurer's office. The individual whose sole duty above all is to manage the money of the taxpayers of West Virginia in terms of their investments, in terms of the investments here in the state, and also acts as the head of West Virginia's bank. And so why is transparency so important? I'll give you a great example. The state treasurer right now, currently, John Perdue, who has been there for 24 years, and it is a very murky office, and we don't know entirely what's going on there. But luckily, through some acts of transparency outside of his office, we've been able to find out one thing that's certainly troubling, and that is that he has his campaign manager. He has put his campaign manager on contract for $2 million taxpayer money to do advertising for his office. So while his campaign manager is being paid by his campaign, at the same time, he's being paid with your money, $2 million, almost $2 million to advertise for that office. Now you tell me that that is good governance. I think not. And so after 24 years in office, do we think that we're going to have more transparency by electing Treasurer Perdue to another 4 years? Now, certainly we all know the answer to that question, and it's somewhat rhetorical, isn't it? We're not going to have better governance in that office and better transparency if we keep electing the same person who's been there for almost a quarter of a century. It's why I'm running on term limits. These executive branch offices should not have someone in there for 24 years. It's not right. It's not right. And there's most states out there do not allow for people to just run for unlimited terms in these executive branch offices. And I think that it is wrong, and I think it is certainly something that needs to change. Now, on modernization, this is something that is absolutely critical to using the state treasurer's office in a new and innovative way in which has not been done before, in which I have gone to many national conventions in the last year since I've been campaigning and spoke with them with this idea that I have. It's called the Jump Start Savings Plan. Now, many of you might be familiar out there with the 529 college savings plan. Allows you to save money for college. And that's great. And those funds, as they grow, you don't pay taxes when you take them out and use them for college. And people can buy books and computers and things of that nature that they can use in their jobs later. Now, that's great. 25% of our population has a college degree. What are we doing for the 75% that don't go to college? I started my career off as a welder. That's how I started my career. And going back and thinking about how I started my career, I started thinking about, why don't we start a savings plan for that blue collar savings plan, the backbone of the economy of West Virginia, the real workers. So what I am proposing in this Jumpstart Savings Plan is for individuals to be able to save money for tools, equipment, certifications, and licenses to put their best foot forward to get going on their career. At one point when I was a welder, I wanted to go off and start my own mobile welding business. The cost incurred to be able to do that, to buy my mobile welding rig, the truck, an oxyacetylene cutting torch, and all the various accessories that need to go along with that kind of an operation was too onerous for me. So we're helping everybody who wants to become a lawyer and a doctor and an accountant and all that. What about the welders? What about the tradesmen out there? What are we doing to help them? If I am elected to office, that is who I am going to try to help, because those are the people, those individuals, the hardworking people here in West Virginia are the ones that deserve to have their interests looked out for, because they are the majority in this state, and we need to be taking care of them, and they are the backbone of this economy. They are the backbone of it. So that I talked about transparency, I talked about modernization. It is hugely important to have both of those in conjunction. And further to transparency, if elected, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to audit that office. We've heard Commissioner Leonhardt speak, we've heard Attorney General Morrissey speak, and we've heard Secretary of State Warner speak about reducing the size of their office and reducing state government. And I think all of them deserve to be applauded for that. They campaigned on that and they fulfilled that promise. This office, the state treasurer's office, has grown every year. In the last 5 years alone, the payroll of that office has increased by $750,000. And now they've gone and continued to ask for more money. There's almost 200 people working in the state treasurer's office. If you're modernizing an office, you're not doing it with more money and more people. Henry Ford didn't create the assembly line and all of a sudden it costs more to make a vehicle and it took more people. That's not how this works. Now, Treasurer Perdue claims that he modernized this office, and what I can tell you, it didn't happen in this century. And we need somebody to come in and clean it up and sweep out a lot of the bad practices that have been going on there for a very long time. Secretary of State Mac Warner, he gets 5 field staff, if I remember correctly, to certify every state, municipal, and county election here in West Virginia. He certifies every election. He registers every business in the state. He's got 5 field representatives handling the entire state of West Virginia. The state treasurer's office nearly has 20. What are all these people doing? What are they doing? And on average, these folks are making over $60,000 a year and have a second job. What is going on here? And the only way we're going to find out what's going on here is to elect me. Elect me, and you can hold me accountable, because this is going to be the most transparent treasurer's office we've ever seen in the state of West Virginia. And if anybody else has any more questions, please chime in. And if they don't, please check out my website, moreforwv.com, or you can email me directly at riley@moreforwv.com. Thank you, and thank you for the time, and God bless.
Oh, we thank you very much. We appreciate that. We're getting to the point where we have a lot of questions that have come in. So we're going to go to that, our Facebook comments, and we're going to start off with a question for the candidates for governor. But we also have, after that, some questions for Attorney General Patrick Morrissey and Secretary of State Mac Warner. So after we get through this question for governor's candidate or candidates for governor, we will move on to our Facebook comment questions for Mac Warner and Patrick Morrissey. One question we've had come in for governor was, if elected, what programs would you put into place for West Virginians with disabilities, if any, and what programs or plan do you have to address homelessness in the state? I'm going to start off with Mr. Lunsford. Give me just a moment here. Okay, Mr. Lunsford, you have the floor, sir.
Well, I was wondering when somebody was going to talk about the 7,150 foster kids and the amount of homeless that's in the inner cities and a lot of different, from Huntington, West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia. I had a guy in Charleston say he estimates there's 2,500 homeless people in Charleston. What I would like to do, and if you'll come into my Facebook page and watch my live broadcast where we have a lot of time where we can cut loose and really talk about things, is I like to focus on a small house or a cabin or a storage container type home, because I believe that I don't think we can let the homeless and the drug addicts walk the street. I think we have to say, here's a place, if you're going to stay in Huntington, West Virginia, you've got to come to this place. This is our designated place. We're going to do the best we can for you, but you're not allowed to wander the streets. I've been contacted by different states around the country, and that's what they, that's their plan. That's what they would do. But once again, as we talked about the regulations earlier, we get into all these laws about what you can do and what you can't do. So we're going to have to love them into that place. And a good example of loving them into something is every Saturday morning in Huntington, West Virginia, Trinity Episcopal Church feeds the homeless. So they're all in one place every Saturday morning to get a meal. So there's no reason they can't be in one place and be happy if they're going to be homeless. And, and we go into that group and we find out, we say, look, we figure there's three kinds of homeless. There's somebody that had a heart attack, lost a job, maybe lost their mind when their wife or husband left them, and it bankrupted them, and now they're out on the street. That person would like to get back in the workforce. We do everything we can to get them back in the workforce. Then we've got another person that's got an addiction problem. Well, there's getting to be different programs we can help them with. And then we got that third guy that says, I'm a wanderer. Man, maybe I served my country, maybe I did whatever. I'm not doing anything else. And, we've got to think about that person, because you can't make people do anything. We've got that. Now, as far as all the disability issues, I had one guy say, you know what, I can't even get in to fish at a state park because the facilities are so bad. And he's a lifelong friend of mine, and I have guaranteed him that if I'm elected governor, we definitely do all we can to make things more accessible for all those persons with any disability. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I should have mentioned this just briefly before. We have so many people that are participating tonight. We have some questions coming in. So I'd ask everyone to just be as brief as you can with these answers. I'm going to move right along to Mr. Sheedy. Give me just a moment, sir. Okay, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I know traveling around the state, we see homeless all over. Elkins, you name it, they're all over the place. It's not just one localized area of the state that has homeless. Part of the reason is that West Virginians are so welcoming to everybody and anybody. That's just the way we are. That's our nature. That's how we are. And you can't fault that. But yeah, these people need, as Brooke stated, there are plenty of empty, vacant buildings that could be retrofitted to accommodate some of these people. And as far as the handicap accessibilities, that has come a long way in recently, but still has a long ways to go. You have people that are handicapped that you don't realize handicapped, and they manage, but it could be a lot easier for them too. So there's still a long ways to go on a lot of these areas. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Give me just a moment here. I was caught a little off guard there. Okay, I'm going to turn this on over to Mr. Six. Mr. Six, give me just a moment. Okay, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Those in our state that are disabled need to have the facilities so that they can enjoy what the other citizens of our state enjoy. And I believe that we can make that happen. Our homeless, we need to try and fix that. But we can fix that button and assist our state in many other ways. Mr. Lunsford mentioned building or putting in small cabins and places for them to live. Well, we have, as he's mentioned several times, and as most of us know, that there's probably half or close to half of our citizens who are not productive in our society, in our state. Well, maybe it's not that they're not productive because we haven't asked them to be productive, or we have not put them into that situation that they need to be productive. Let's take our lumber industries, let's take our tradesmen, and let's take people that are retired out of the trades, and let's get them to train those folks. Let's bring them out. Let's make them, if they're going to receive monies from us, let's make them give something back to our state. Let's make our state shine. Let's bring the things out that we need to bring out. You know, you were talking, Mr. Lunsford was talking about the access at our state parks. You know, as I travel around the country, there are states that utilize the prison system to bring people in and do some work. All those folks need to learn those trades. Recently, I spoke with a young man that had been incarcerated. While he was in there, they taught him how to make cabinets. He now has his own small cabinet making business. Some folks just need the hand up and not the hand out. And we as West Virginians need to take that step and say, we understand and we're compassionate, but there is a point that we have to stop it. So I'm all for making it to where if you're getting money from the taxpayers of the state of West Virginia, show up and help our state. Let's make our state thrive. We talk about tourism. There's nothing that turns people off about our tourism more than the litter along the roads and the poor conditions of our small communities. Let's put those folks to work. We can do that. We can bring the pride back in our state. We can make it a place that everyone wants to come and live, not only because there's jobs, but because there's many other things that we can enjoy. And thank you again for taking the time to stick with us this evening as late as it is. And thank you to the Montague County Republican Committee for having us on.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move right along here to Mr. Folk. Mr. Folk, give me just a moment. Okay, sir, you should have the floor.
As long as you can hear me. Just to kind of touch base on what Mr. Six just said, there's nothing that solves the problem like homelessness. And Viktor Frankl, just to jump around a little bit, Viktor Frankl wrote a book. He was a man that went through Auschwitz. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. Well, one of the best ways to find meaning in your life is to be productive. Of course, his story was living through the concentration camp, which nothing in West Virginia even remotely is like Auschwitz. So these people have to get a meaning in life, and oftentimes having a job that provides fulfillment is that meaning. So that's from the perspective of the homeless, and some homeless people, and I've seen them in every major city in the country. Some people choose to be homeless. Not all, but some choose to be homeless. But it's finding that meaning in life, and oftentimes you find that with a job. So I would reiterate a lot what Mr. Six said. As far as disability, the biggest priority right now in the state of West Virginia for disability is making sure and they did a little bit of this in the last legislative session, I believe, is the IDD waiver program, making sure it's fully funded and make sure that wait list. And those are usually adult people that are being taken care of by family members. That's really what I have to say on that subject. And thank you.
Thank you. Give me just a moment here. Okay, I believe we have one more candidate with Woody Thrasher. And then after that, I believe we're going to take a question from Facebook for Mac Warner. So I believe that is up next, just as a heads up. I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Mr. Thrasher. Hold on, just having a little bit of difficulty there getting it unmuted. Mr. Thrasher, I apologize. It doesn't seem to want to cooperate. Do you want to try to Well, I might have to come back to you, Mr. Thrasher, because I can't get that to unmute on you. Having a little bit of technical difficulty there. In the meantime, I'm just going to remind everyone that we do have some questions coming in through Facebook on comments. I believe we are going to go over to Mr. Mac Warner here in just a minute so that we can keep this thing moving. Give me just a moment here, everybody. Yeah, we can't get that question. So I'm going to move on here as soon as I can get a question fed to me.
Hey, I'm sorry, Kyle. I'm sorry, Kyle. I'll jump in here. I do have the question. It wasn't actually a Facebook question. It was one that was texted to us. And so let's start with a question for Secretary of State Mac Warner. Let me get Mac. Unmuted. Mac, I've got you unmuted, so I'll ask the question again. We're late in the night, so our brevity is being rewarded by shortening this. But Mac,
Sure.
The question that was posted via text: what is your office doing to combat foreign interference in our elections, and how do foreign governments use social media to influence our elections?
Well, they use it by putting out false information, misinformation, disinformation. We've actually led the nation again in the education of people. I've been out to probably 30 or 40 high schools over the last year or so, giving the presentation. That presentation then was shared with all the secretaries of state across the United States. They have then transformed that. I've been over to Ohio, New Jersey, various other states have asked me because of this experience that we've had starting at Harvard, through the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and others, and that is to inform people what that misinformation looks like. It can be putting out wrong dates, wrong times. It's trying to get people to go against one another inside the United States. So you might have something that's pro, say, Black Lives Matter, and then pro Police Lives Matter, and so forth, and get them to go into the streets to fight one another and that sort of thing. So it's all available on our website, the Secretary of State's website. If you're interested, please go to that. If you have any questions, call us. I'll be glad to go into more depth on that. Thank you.
Very good. And thank you, Secretary Warner. Again, I know the hour is getting late. We apologize for this dragging on, but public engagement is good, although our audience is not as large as we may have liked to have seen it, but they are an engaged audience. And so we do have questions that have flowed in those comments and then via text. And so next up will be a question to our incumbent Attorney General, Patrick Morrissey. Attorney General, give me one moment here. I'll get you unmuted.
Great. You hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We can see you. Again,
Great.
It's late and the hour is late, and we're sorry for that. But a successful town hall is one that has people engaged. And so, Mr. Attorney General, we'll ask this question. How will a potential Supreme Court of the United States decision declaring Obamacare unconstitutional affect those with pre-existing conditions?
Yeah, I'm actually grateful that that question was posed for a few reasons. One, I think it's critical for people to know why West Virginia is on that lawsuit. As many people know, the individual mandate in Obamacare is unconstitutional. You cannot force an individual mandate that they purchase health insurance. Now, at the same time, regardless of what happens with the Supreme Court decision and whether that issue gets formalized, whether people know that individual mandate is unconstitutional, we're going to be in a position either on the federal level or the state level to protect people with pre-existing conditions. I think it's critical for people to know because for many years you've heard the other side make scurrilous arguments that all of the provisions that people have relied on are going to go away. I think what's important to note is that we need a better market-oriented healthcare system, but we need to make sure we're looking out for our most vulnerable. That means ensuring that people with pre-existing conditions get covered gold, to make sure that we open up these insurance exchanges so we have the ability to dramatically lower premiums. That's the goal, because we're seeing premium hikes of over 260% since Obamacare took place. That's unacceptable to me on every level. So here's what's going to happen with the court decision. If we prevail, The individual mandate will be struck down, and there will be other provisions. We don't know all of them that'll change as well. But then I'm hopeful we have a chance to both protect people who need that coverage, those with pre-existing conditions, and then finally reopen those exchanges to ensure that the premium levels for working class West Virginians, who we all need to work with and for, are in place.
Very good, and thank you, Mr. Attorney General. We're going to go to our candidates for Ag Commissioner next. We'll go to Kent Lenhart first. Commissioner Lenhart, I hope I didn't catch you off guard there.
No, we're fine.
Okay, so, you know, your office is one that specifically touches people's lives in a very tangible way. And so our question that's been received via Facebook Live for yours is a seeming technical question, but it involves the private citizen's ability to own quail in the state of West Virginia. And so I thought there's likely no one better here to answer that first than Commissioner Lenhart. And then we'll let Mr. Ramey have his opportunity to address that topic as well. So go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, actually, you can raise quail in the state of West Virginia, but it's considered a game bird. So the Department of Natural Resources is the one that issues the license for game birds in West Virginia. We do like to know where they are because we are on the outlook for avian influenza, because we don't want our poultry flocks, the chickens that we raise in the state of West Virginia, to get any of those diseases. But the license is issued by the Department of Natural Resources.
No, very good. Again, it's a technical question that I didn't have the knowledge or the expertise to address. You know, I have stocked a quail or two, but I've never raised a quail, so I didn't know. I didn't know anything to that nature. Mr. Ramey, I'll bring that over to you for just a minute, but I think Commissioner Lenhart answered it thoroughly. Mr. Ramey, do you have a word that you'd like to add on any subject related to that?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a double-edged one, actually. So it's not all quail that are under the Department of Natural Resources. It depends on the variety of quail, as there's several variety. What they control is the wild game bird variety, as Mr. Leonhardt had said. But there's actually a variety called Coturnix, or there's other pronunciations of it. But those were developed a couple of thousand years ago or so by the Japanese, and they are actually a larger variety of quail where essentially they couldn't even survive in the wilderness to turn them loose. So we should be able to grow those and have those, and I will fight for citizens' rights to be able to do that, because by the type of quail it is, they should not be declared a game bird under control of the DNR. If I answer your question, I'll turn it over to you, or I can expand on that.
No, that's, I think you addressed it. I will come back to Commissioner Lenhart just to see if there was any clarity provided there. And if you had anything else to add, I'd like to give you the final word there.
We're fine with my answer stands.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, you know, we've come a long way. It's 9:25. Our viewers have stuck with us on Facebook Live and on YouTube Live. And so I think we did lose Mr. Thrasher, and apologetically, someone has just texted me and asked if we could resend the invitation to Mr. Thrasher, and I don't have that ability while I'm actually in the live host process. So maybe Paula or Kyle could help out there and resend that invitation to Mr. Thrasher. In the meantime, again, everyone has held their time. We've done an excellent job keeping our audience, and I apologize for us going late. And we certainly didn't intend to misuse anyone's time or belabor any points. But we're going just to come into our conclusion period. So we'll start with our conclusions and let each candidate have a few minutes to address the audience in a free-form fashion. We're going to start with Mr. Folk, and then we'll go to Mr. Lunsford, I'm sorry, has had to step off. So we'll do Folk, and then Six, and then Sheedy, and then we'll start into the candidates for Board of Public Works. So, Mr. Folk, then Mr. Six, and then Mr. Sheedy. Go
Thank
ahead, Mr. Folk.
I got it. Thank you. You know, 6 years in the House of Delegates served me well to prepare me for dealing with knowing the players that are involved, and more importantly, cleaning up one of the last places in Raleigh. Probably would suggest that the treasurer's office is another place in the executive part of the government that needs cleaned up, and that is the state governor's office. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in that office. And I'm doing it for very simple. And I just have you might have seen some of you, at least on the call here, saw I had my youngest son here with me a minute ago. I'm doing it because I want to make West Virginia a place that you can live, work, and raise a family. And I'll do that through honesty, transparency, and holding government accountable. Some of the biggest pieces of legislation that I passed were ones that held the government accountable, whether it was the FOIA bill, which basically made sure that local governments and state governments allowed you to get the information that they had without being cost prohibitive. And that was a bipartisan, it literally it proved that I could bring people from divergent backgrounds together. In this case, the pro-economic groups and the media to come together and to compromise on a bill that held government more accountable. I want to say something very, very bluntly. Honesty and transparency. When somebody gets up on this call and says that they don't support something that they clearly did in the past and doesn't just own it and correct themselves, that's a problem. When somebody says they sponsored a bill, but yet never served in the West Virginia legislature, so therefore they couldn't sponsor a bill, there's something wrong with that. If you want honesty, transparency, and if you want to clean up one of the last branches in the governor's office, branch of the executive part of the government, I'm your guy, and I have experience to do it. And you're going to need somebody with experience on how to balance a budget without raising taxes in the next year. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Folk. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your endurance staying with us tonight. Next up will be Mr. Doug Six, who's also a candidate for governor. Doug, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Folk is correct. It takes honesty, it takes integrity, it takes accountability. I believe that I have all of that to offer the state of West Virginia and to the citizens of West Virginia. We tend to watch our elections go through and we listen to the politicians. I am not a politician. I'm not a polished speaker, but I am a hard worker. And I believe that hard work in our state can make it come to the forefront and make it a better state for everyone involved. I appreciate everybody staying on tonight. And I would appreciate it if you would at least consider to vote for me. Thank you very much, and I will do my best if I'm elected to be the good governor that I profess to be, and you can hold me accountable.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Six. We appreciate your time tonight. Appreciate your answering our questions. Next up will be Mr. Charles Sheedy. Mr. Sheedy, I believe the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Once again, I want to thank everybody for sticking around tonight and listening to these very important issues that we've been discussing. I'm a lifelong true Republican. I embrace term limits. Riley Moore spoke on term limits. He wants term limits also. We need term limits, not only in the executive levels. We need term limits in the legislative levels also. We need term limits in city level government. We need term limits in county level government. We need term limits, period. That is what the founding fathers developed the Constitution on. We're going to work for the government and then leaving when your time was done, not making a career of it. Once again, I'm the only military combat veteran running for governor. I have the experience. I have endured hardships. I know what goes on. So if you want somebody that is dedicated, that is loyal, that is truly committed, I'm your man. Once again, thank you very much.
Very good. And thank you, Mr. Sheedy. We're going to, but first I want to pause here for just a moment and mention that we have not been purposefully excluding Mr. Thrasher from the conversation. However, there's some sort of technical difficulty. I'm being told by a member of his campaign staff that he can hear us, he can see us. He's attempting to answer, but on our end, we unmute his mic and there's no audio coming through. There's also no video feed coming through. And so just, I do apologize that we're not intentionally silencing Mr. Thrasher, and we haven't intended to do so. It's the nature of these processes that there's a glitch somewhere with the processes that we're using. And so, again, I apologize to Mr. Thrasher and his campaign, and those who are watching who were hoping to hear more from Mr. Thrasher. I apologize for that, but we're doing everything we can to try to get him reconnected on a better line, on a better connection. And if that occurs before we wrap up, by all means, we'll certainly give him an opportunity to address the question that he did miss, and then to provide his closing statement. But in the meantime, Attorney General Patrick Morrissey is up next with his closing and final remarks. I've got you unmuted, Attorney General. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be with you tonight. I am hopeful that there will be a point in the near future when we're past a lot of these COVID-19 issues and we can have that human connection again that we all yearn for. And this election for Attorney General is a critical one in West Virginia and also for our nation's future as well. These AG positions are so important with respect to many of the issues we're grappling with right now. COVID-19, you need to have someone in place who's going to be able to help protect West Virginians, keep them safe, who has that experience to make sure that everything comes back on track. We're in a very difficult position. Now is not the time to turn things over to inexperienced hands or folks that are socialist types. We have to do better. And we've been doing so many incredible things in the AG's office during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the critical issue that we're facing right now is that President Trump needs a legal ally in West Virginia, someone who's going to help support him legally, because the only way that many of the folks who are trying to tear our president down get to beat him is they're going to try to go in the courts. And the last thing we need is for the West Virginia Attorney General's office to be weaponized to go after this president. We can't let that happen. So it's critical to reelect me and also a slate of candidates in West Virginia who are going to be fighting for conservative principles, West Virginia values. Now, I know a lot of people here may say, Patrick Morrissey has run for office before, we've had success. And you may say, let's focus on a lot of other candidates on the ballot. We do need to have a clean sweep to make sure we have strength in all of these Board of Public Work positions, in the governor's positions. But let me mention to you that by being a forceful, a conservative attorney general, I've made some enemies over the years nationally. Bloomberg and Hillary and Biden and a lot of the radical national liberal groups, they're going to pour millions of dollars into this AG's race. Why? Because they know how effective we are fighting for your Second Amendment rights, standing up for life, making sure we're going after government overreach, and acting with integrity and honor in office and taking on the friends and family plan here in West Virginia. Because all those millions are going to be coming in, they're going to want to prop up their radical candidates on the other side. We need to get a good grassroots effort in every single county. And in Monongalia County, this is really ground zero because you're really a central place where we have to do well. So I implore everyone watching today, take the time, help us fight the multi-gazillionaires who are coming in. They'll be putting millions of dollars in. Go to patrickmorrissey.com. If you can contribute $5, I would be grateful. If you could volunteer, let us know. We want to have an army of people throughout every single county. From my Senate race to the previous AG races, we've put together grassroots teams that have outstripped almost anyone running on the ballot. We need to do that again this time to elect a lot of the good candidates that you're seeing here tonight, and to make sure that we keep the House of Delegates, the state Senate, and all of our federal offices as well. So I want to say thank you. Please go to patrickmorrissey.com and look at how you might be willing to help out, because if we win and we can withstand the money, the odds are very good that we're going to have a clean sweep all the way from President Trump down to your local city council race. So thank you very much. Get out to vote on June 9th in the primary and get involved in their big Supreme Court races too. We need your help and engagement there. So thank you for putting this on tonight, and I look forward to seeing you in person.
Very good. And thank you, Attorney General Morrissey. I appreciate that promo. We do have a virtual town hall coming up this coming Monday with several committed candidates who are running for the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. And so I appreciate your segue into that promo. That'll be this Monday, May 11th at 7 p.m. We hope our viewers will tune in and join us for that. And Attorney General, thank you for joining us tonight. And we too look forward to seeing you in Monongalia County soon.
All right, great.
Okay, next up for a conclusion, a closing statement will be Secretary of State Mac Warner. Mr. Warner, give me just 1 minute. Okay, Secretary Warner, you have the floor.
Ethan, Attorney General Morrissey's message wasn't only a segue into what you were talking about, but it's a segue into my message, and that is to get the people elected. What is the most important position in the state to ensure free and fair elections? And that is the Secretary of State's job. And that's why I love this position so much. I talked earlier about putting a team into place. There's the management part, the coaching part, and then the players part. We've assembled the team. We've got the management. We have the pieces in place for championship after championship after championship. And we're just starting on the beginning of this championship run. So let's keep it going. There's no reason to refer back to a losing candidate, a losing Secretary of State, which preceded me. And it's time to continue with the efficient programs that we have put into place. And that's why I appreciate an opportunity like this to talk to those conservatives in Monongalia County who are geared towards electing that full slate of candidates that you've been able to talk to this evening. Let's put those in place and not give the reins back over to somebody who's not interested in the list maintenance, is going to push vote by mail, automatic voter registration, all the different agendas that they have that are geared towards a situation where fraud, waste, and abuse can occur. So I take this job very seriously. I appreciate the opportunity to serve the people of West Virginia. I appreciate each of your support. And again, I look forward to re-election. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you this evening.
Very good. Thank you, Secretary Warner. We appreciate your patience and endurance staying with us tonight. We appreciate always your thoughtful answers, your transparency, and your willingness to address topics that are relevant to not only our voters here in Monongalia County, but the voters statewide. And so on behalf of our committee, we thank you for your service. We look forward to your continued service to our state. And we're proud to call you our Secretary of State.
Thank you, Ethan.
Okay, next up, we will have Riley Moore, candidate for Secretary or West Virginia State Treasurer. Riley, before I let you take off there, I will say just a moment ago, you mentioned that you had your website, www.moreforwestvirginiawv.com. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's right. Moreforwv.com.
As a fellow Moore, I appreciate that. So it's moreforwv.com. I guess I can't run out and buy that domain now. So feel free to use it in good health. But go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, we always need more for WV. So it's in any event, Ethan, thank you so much for putting this on. And thank you very much to the Monongalia Republican Executive Committee for putting this on. Thank you so very much. I've had a great time here, and thank you for everyone who's still listening. And as Attorney General Morrissey pointed out rightly, this is a huge election cycle that we're about to enter into here. 2020 is a very, very big deal. We have redistricting coming up just around the corner. It's a massive election, and we cannot cede any ground in the gains that we've made over all these years in trying to push back Democrat control. But there's one place where the Democrats are still in control, and that's the state treasurer's office. That's the state treasurer's office. And right now, during this COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, we as a state have lost billions of dollars in investments. We've lost millions of dollars in the pension fund. And where is our state treasurer? Nowhere. He has said nothing. That is not leadership. Leadership steps out in front when there is a crisis and takes control and speaks to the people plainly and tells them how they're going to address it, what are the challenges, and how we will overcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I am elected state treasurer, that is what I am going to do. I'm sure I'm going to be inheriting a very big mess if I am to be elected, but one that I gladly will take on and gladly will be a great steward of your taxpayer dollars if I am to be elected. So, ladies and gentlemen, after 24 years in office, John Perdue, do we think another 4 years is going to see a more transparent, more accountable state treasurer's office who's in control of $13 billion worth of assets of your money? No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And I think you all know the best way for us to achieve those goals. Those goals as conservatives that we have, those goals that we have as West Virginians, to have greater accountability and transparency in the state and its government. And that is change. We must change this office. It's absolutely critical, particularly when you think about the massive amount of losses that we've had in West Virginia as it relates to our investments, as it relates to our different funds. We must have change in the state treasurer's office. And I'm proud to be running for the next state treasurer, West Virginia. It's not just about me. It's also about my family. I have a 2-year-old daughter and I have another one on the way here in June. I refuse to sit back idly and not have a more transparent and better government for my children as they are growing up in this state. And we can do better and we will do better. So let's all come together here, elect this slate here in 2020 November that comes out of the primary, because it's not just about our hopes and our dreams, but it's also the ones that are worthy of our children's future. So in any event, I just wanted to touch on briefly my legislative record to make clear for everybody who's still listening. I have a 100% pro-life voting record. I'm the only candidate in this race that has that. I have an A rating from the NRA, 100% voting record on those issues. I had one of the most conservative voting records in the House of Delegates when I served there. And I will take those exact same principles that guided me in the state legislature to the state treasurer's office. So I thank you all so very much for hanging in here and listening to me. I need your help and I need your support to win here. John Perdue has been there a very long time and is raising a lot of money. And if you could visit moreforwv.com and just chip in a few dollars here to keep us going, we'd greatly appreciate it so we can have true change in the state treasurer's office in 2020. Thank you all so much. God bless and have a good night.
Very good. And thank you, Mr. Moore. We appreciate your time. As with all of our other candidates, we appreciate your time and endurance for staying with us. We look forward to when things get back to normal and we can have you visit us here in Montague County and speak to our group live. And thank you for joining us tonight. Next up will be incumbent Agricultural Commissioner Kent Lenhart, and then we'll go to Roy Ramey after that. So Commissioner Lenhart, the floor is yours.
You know, the Department of Agriculture touches the life of every West Virginian every day. And most people don't even know exactly what the Department of Ag does. So these forums are so very important so that we can get the word out and not only educate the voters on what the Department of Agriculture does, but on who we are. I want to thank you, Ethan, Paula, and Kyle for putting this on and sticking with this, not only tonight, but the other nights that you're doing this. And thank the Montague County GOP committee for the work they're doing. No candidate wins an election by themselves. It takes a team effort throughout the state, and Monongalia County has really stepped up to the plate. And so I thank you very much for that. Other thing I want to mention that we didn't get to talk about, your Department of Agriculture also has a national voice. I sit on the National Association of State Directors of Agriculture. My peers right away elected me as an officer with the Southern Association of State Directors of Agriculture. And in June, I will take over as vice president of that organization. I'm proud to say I wrote an op-ed in support of the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. The White House picked it up and retweeted it. Then they called me and asked permission to use it to convince Congress to pass that trade deal. I was very honored. Obviously, I said yes. I was very honored to be on the White House lawn with the president as he signed that historic trade agreement that's going to help agriculture throughout the nation. So your Commissioner of Agriculture is not just helping West Virginia, but it's also helping the nation. And I'm standing with President Trump. I was also asked by Senator Capito to be a guest at one of her committees, and I testified on chronic wasting disease, which many of you know is a disease that affects our wild deer and elk populations. And we have it here in West Virginia. It's contained in a certain area, but we have to do something about that. That testimony led to Congress consolidating all the national research that's being done so we can get rid of this disease and keep our wildlife safe, just as well as we keep our deer farms safe in West Virginia. Our deer farming is expanding. Our hemp growing is expanding. We started with 28 growers when I took office, and I had 450 applications last year. We must be doing a pretty good job, and it must be working. So I want to thank everybody for hanging in there. I appreciate. My website is kenforwv.com. Like every other candidate, we all need the same supports. So please visit it. And thank you all again for sticking with us all.
Very good, Commissioner Lenhart. We do appreciate your time. Thank you for staying with us on a late night. You're a son of Monongalia County, and you're probably the nearest candidate to me at the moment. You're probably just a mile over the hill from me. So thanks for staying with us. Thanks for giving your answers and being truthful and forthright. We appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you in person in the future. Next up will be Mr. Ramey for the last conclusion or closing statement. Let's see. Okay, Mr. Ramey, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm not a professional politician and I don't have a lot of money, but I am a farmer with real experience, and I'm a statesman. So I've been defending the rights of the people of this country for 31 years of my adult life and still doing so. And I believe it's important that we take a strict interpretation of our Constitution. And it doesn't matter whether it's times of distress like we have now with the COVID, or it's food or whatever policy or issue that you come up with. We have to protect the rights of the people no matter what. And the big thing is right now our government has gotten too overgrown, too out of control. They protect the industry, and we just don't need that. It's bad for the people, and it's bad for the business of this country. However, we can do great things by backing out of those roles and allowing free enterprise to really work. It really does. And you got to stick with that principle in everything, or you don't have a principle at all. So I'm going to continue to do what I've been doing in that regard. And it doesn't matter when it's convenient or not convenient. You just got to be with it full time. We've lost over 700 farms in the state during the last 3 years. So I think that we can do a whole lot better by cutting some of the regulations and improving the education and opportunities. There's a lot of young people around that are looking for that opportunity. They're underemployed, they're unemployed. We have a huge drug epidemic across the state. And now with the economic repercussions from the COVID, we're going to have a whole lot of people that are going to need new opportunities to get re-energized. And I believe that food production is a way to do that. And we can give those people that opportunity by backing out and then teaching them how to do this in a regenerative manner. And that's a more inexpensive method. So I'm going to stick on those principles. And you got to remember that just like my slogan, food freedom is freedom. And we stick with that all the time. So thank you very much. And I look forward to serving as your next Commissioner of Agriculture for West Virginia.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ramey. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for staying with us. Your image there has changed the most with all of us. You've driven and now you're dark, and we appreciate you hanging in there. So I appreciate all of you. I'm going to switch just one moment to gallery view. We kind of do a wave at the end of the night. We're gonna wave, and then we'll close the meeting. Again, everyone, we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate our viewers watching. We appreciate our candidates hanging in there and being diligent to stick with us. And we do have another one Monday night at 11, or Monday night the 11th at 7 p.m. Hopefully it doesn't last till 11. So it's Monday the 11th at 7 p.m. Those are for candidates who are running for State Supreme Court of Appeals. Again, to Mr. Woody Thrasher, we do sincerely apologize for silencing your voice in any way. We did not intend to do it. There's some sort of technical problem, and it was purely not intentional. And so we'll work something out with you. Perhaps we could call you back. We could do a bonus footage with you where you could answer the questions that you weren't able to answer. But again, thanks to all. Thanks to everyone who watched. Thanks to everyone who joined. And we look forward to seeing you in person when the smoke and the dust settles here. So thanks a lot, all. Bye-bye.